Chapter 8:12. John, meeting you again under such circumstances is indeed a little awkward. King Strange Ghost said indifferently. Just awkward? You became King Strange Ghost, destroyed the North, destroyed Winterfell, and killed all humans. After doing all these things, you're only a little awkward? John was about to break down. Awkwardness is already a luxury. It's boring and unnecessary. King Strange Ghost's tone was flat, but his voice paused for a moment. Bang! John stepped back until his back hit the steel guard's shield. Uncle Bunyan, if you were Uncle Bunyan, then tell me what happened. John's angry roar was full of pleading. After a long silence, just when everyone thought that he would not answer this question, King Strange Ghost said softly, I was ordered to investigate the reason for the strange movements of the barbarians beyond the Great Wall, and I encountered huff, huff, huff. The wind suddenly weakened, and the dragon flame fireball shone again. The green flame in the brazier rose into the air like a fountain. This area allowed the fire element to exist again. Attack! He focused his mind, tensed his muscles and took a step forward. Then he shuddered. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The north wind was like the knife of Shao Li's flying dagger. It accurately found the gap in the armor and drilled deep into the bone marrow, freezing the blood and soul. The fire-forbidden domain was activated again. Erlu suppressed it again. Although she had walked back and forth twice, which made Dany extremely depressed, she also looked at the King of Strange Ghosts and seemed to understand something. It probably still retained part of Bunyan Stark's humanity, and if Bunyan's emotions were awakened, he would lose the divinity of King Strange Ghost. Humanity and divinity were incompatible, and even conflicted with each other. If he could use love to completely awaken Bunyan's consciousness, then King Strange Ghost broke away from his memories and said coldly, I used to be Bunyan Stark, but this name and identity no longer mean anything to me. Jon Stark, I am the King of White Ghosts. If you are King Strange Ghost, there is no need to hide everything that happened to Ranger Bunyan. You also said that he has nothing to do with you now, Dany said loudly. Clang! The response she received was the unsheathing of an ice sword. King Ygwe pulled out the ice sword on his back that looked like an umbrella handle. Different from the transparent ice in the hands of the normal deviant ghosts, the sword in the deviant ghost king's hand seemed to be made of cheese. It was milky white and had strange runes in the shape of ripples on it. The edge of the sword flashed with a faint blue light. The one-handed sword, which was 3 feet long and 2 fingers wide, was pointed at the crowd at the city gate. You want to challenge me, so I'm here. Now, who wants to challenge me? Or do you want to do it together? Can we really go together? Jaime blurted out. Sure, King Ygwe said indifferently. Everyone was surprised and happy. Jaime grinned and said, That's great. King Ygwe didn't seem to do anything, but suddenly, the wind and snow stopped, and a faint light appeared in the endless darkness. The bulb-like blue eyeballs were like blue stars dotting the dark sky. A group of deviant ghosts. Come on, let's go together, King Ygwe said. His Blackie was 1 kilometer behind King Ygwe. It flew at a low altitude at high speed, spewing out red dragon flames. The darkness was like jelly, filling the sky and freezing the entire world. The dragon flames cut down like a knife, cutting a hole in the jelly. Ah! Everyone couldn't help but exclaim. Through the hole they saw a scene that could only be seen in nightmares. Hundreds of deviant ghosts lined up in front. They were either riding dead horses or ice spiders with sharp spikes. They were like the most regular army of knights. Behind the cavalry there was a spread. The people on the city wall looked through binoculars. The black dragon flew 3 kilometers away, but there was still an army of undead standing in the snow. But everyone also found that there were only about 200 deviant ghost cavalry units 1 kilometer behind King Ygwe. Even that group of deviant ghost cavalry was 500 meters away. If they were faster, they might be able to surround King Ygwe before the army of deviant ghosts arrived. As everyone was thinking this, Erlu strode out of the protection of the shield wall and stood in front of King Ygwe. He said in a deep voice, Bunyan Stark, I don't know what you did, or what those monsters did to you, but from the moment you led the undead army into the north, we were destined to fight to the death. Even though the deviant ghosts brought extreme cold to Winterfell, Aunt May still wore a red robe. Her sleeves fluttered as she walked to Erlu's side and stood beside him. Everything is arranged by fate. The night is long, but there will be an end. servant of the frost god. Your fate will end in front of the savior. She raised her head, and the ruby at her Adam's apple shone with a bright red light. A warm and dry aura spread out in all directions with her as the center. Boom boom boom. Danny was surprised to see that the dragon fireball above her head expanded again. The white light shone in all directions. At this moment, even the roaring north wind calmed down. The icy cold air turned into a spring breeze, and the frost on the ground that had solidified because of King Igue's arrival melted inch by inch. Not only did the fire element recover, it even began to accumulate. In King Igue's forbidden fire domain, Melisandre created a fire domain with her own strength. The wind and frost elements in the forbidden fire domain were all converted into fire elements. Danny was shocked and suddenly recalled the 3 realms of fire control, PS. Back then, she used the 3 gods to cave, divine protective skill to exchange for a fire witchcraft inherited from Valeglia from the first generation of youths. She named it the extremely low-level, fire control spell. But in fact its real name was King of Fire Demons. Because its highest realm was to convert other elements into fire elements and ignite all high-energy elements. Unfortunately, the fire control spell was incomplete and lacked the last and most important 3rd realm. Now Melisandre used something similar to King of Fire Demons, in front of Dragon Queen. Crack crack 5 meters in front of King Igue. The ice crystals on the ground melted and melted back and forth, making slight cracking sounds. The red-robed woman and King Igue were wrestling. King Igue controlled the elemental power within a 5-kilometer radius, while Aunt May could only maintain the natural balance of the elements within a 10-meter radius. Yes, it was only natural balance. Maybe because the enemy was too terrifying, she couldn't really increase the potential of the fire elements like King of Fire Demons. 10 prisoners covered in filth and tied up were brought in front of the red-robed woman and arranged in an arc. The center of the arc was actually King Igue. King Igue didn't move. His right hand holding the sword was lowered and the tip of the sword pointed to the ground. He looked at everything indifferently, including Danny and Old Boar. They could only watch as the 10 wailing prisoners were drenched in the green wildfire. They knew what the red-robed woman was going to do, but they didn't stop her. The night is long, everywhere is dangerous. We mortals live and die alone, lost and hesitant in the valley. Fortunately, there is a true Lord blessing me. With just a look, the 10 sacrifices were ignited and burned like 10 torches. Amidst the wailing, the red-robed woman chanted softly. Erlu and his 5 red heart knights chanted together. And there seemed to be something disharmonious mixed in. The one on the side, why do you have a white 7-pointed star on your chest that represents the church's knights? But he was indeed wearing the red heart cloak and prayed the loudest with the most solemn expression. The extremely sacred and solemn ritual became extremely funny because of the demon hunter Richard. Danny wanted to laugh, but she tried her best to hold it in. Buzz, the sky cracked open. A trace of white light seeped out of the dark dome. The white light spread out like a spider web. A ray of sunlight fell on everyone's heads. Ah, the sun is out. Long live Lalo, long live the Light King, long live the God King Lalo. The 20,000 soldiers and civilians of Winterfell shouted excitedly, almost hysterically. The sun was out. It broke through the cold and dark sky, revealing a head. Winterfell, which had been dark for many days, was once again bathed in sunlight. The northern plains was like a stage, and Winterfell was the main character on the stage. In the dark theater, a searchlight fell from above and enveloped the main character. Aunt May raised her arms and shouted, "King of Light, please bestow power upon us believers." Buzz buzz, the sky was trembling, and the light was getting stronger. It was as if the gods had placed a magnifying glass under the sun, and the focal point of the convex lens was, clang. Erlu was enlightened. He pulled out the red hero's sword from his waist and raised it above his head. He shouted fervently, "I am the rightful king of the 7 kingdoms, the king of the Undulls, Lorna and ancestors, and the protector of the entire territory. It is my responsibility to protect the Westeros from the invasion of the gods. I am the prophecy's savior. I will use my life to fulfill the responsibility that fate has entrusted to me. Long live Lalo, long live the Westeros, the living will never die." The focal point of the sun fell on the body of the red sword. Extreme heat and light were emitted from the sword. as if it had become a small sun. At this moment, everyone finally understood why it, which could only emit red light, was called the Radiant Messenger. God of War, the number one god of war of the seven kingdoms. The people on the city wall were affected by this miracle and shouted fervently, God of War, Mage God, God King. John muttered, the nonsense that day has come true. Suddenly, Little Red of Slave Bay took the initiative to talk to Danny. The sun in the sky above Slave Bay disappeared. The sun shattered. The sun was disappearing, but the sun did not completely disappear. Before, there was still a circle of white light. During the day, it was like a gloomy day with dark clouds. Now, Slave Bay was as dark as Winterfell. The sky suddenly darkened, causing chaos in Meereen. Then Little Red found Danny. The remaining light and heat of the sun has been released by Lalo to Winterfell. Danny suddenly realized, but she was also worried. It was either success or death. If they could not kill the King of Strange Ghosts today, the long night would cover the world faster. Yes, the shattering of the sun only meant the beginning of the long night. For it to completely descend, the sun would disappear and the world would enter a state of extreme night. Without a doubt, Lalo's actions sped up the complete destruction of the sun. But Danny did not think that Lalo was wrong. Using the remaining power of the sun to deal with the King of Strange Ghosts would allow the sun to achieve its greatest value. Chapter 8:13. After ending the battle with Little Red's dragon spirit, Danny turned her attention back to Winterfell and Erlu's light messenger. Heat and white light radiated in all directions, and the abundant divine power caused the air to ripple like water. This was probably the strongest weapon Danny had ever seen in this world. She looked down at the tainted fake red sword piece at her waist and frowned. Suddenly she felt disgusted. After a moment of hesitation, she took off her sword belt, stepped forward, and threw it to the pale, frightened, trembling demon hunter like trash. When the King of Light revealed his miracles, everyone cheered. Only he was an exception. In fact, Sir Richard, who was under the sun, did not feel the warmth and light. Instead, he was almost scared to death. I'll give it to you. Keep up the good work and create good results. For me? Why? Richard held the scabbard in a daze and looked up at the sun in the sky. He immediately shivered. In this situation at this time, why are you giving this weapon to me? Is she trying to shift the blame? The demon hunter was about to cry. Like the summer sun falling on Winterfell, the Ghoul King and his ghoul warhorse emitted white steam, and the forbidden fire domain was completely broken. Looking at the war god of the seven kingdoms walking towards him step by step, he jumped off the ghoul warhorse. Just like when they were alive, he patted the horse's butt. The ghoul warhorse galloped away from the sunlight and disappeared into the darkness. Clang! The Ghoul King and Erlu collided. The two swords, the milky white ice sword emitting blue light and the blazing white-red sword, clashed. Erlu knew that the Ghoul King's speed and strength exceeded that of a normal person. When he swung his sword, he slightly pressed down on the hilt and did not fight with his opponent. As the two people crossed each other, the blades of the two swords also crossed each other. War God, the number one war god of the seven kingdoms. Although it was only one round, the Ghoul King's reputation was too strong and terrifying. Erlu was not killed instantly and seemed to be able to exchange blows. Everyone watching the battle was excited. Danny's eyes narrowed. Although the collision between the two swords was short, the consumption of divine power on the Radiant Envoy was terrifying. Of course, Lalo's god power was not wasted either. This was a process of mutual consumption. The King of Strange Ghosts' ice sword was attacked by the light emissary, and a huge amount of ice power also disappeared. But the problem now was, could the War God, Mage God, and Deity King outlast the Variant Ghost King who had the home field advantage? It was a long night. It wasn't the Deviant Ghosts that brought about the long night. It was the long night that made the Deviant Ghosts active, and the activity of the Deviant Ghosts intensified the darkness and ice of the long night. War God, the number one war god of the seven kingdoms. Dragon Queen suddenly became a fan of Stannis. She screamed louder than anyone else. She seemed to have fallen into an inexplicable frenzy. She waved her hands and crossed the shield wall. When no one was paying attention to her, she yelled as she approached the battlefield step by step. Clang, clang, clang. The ice sword and the fire sword quickly clashed, emitting a piercing shriek. Erlu did not seem to be holding a sword. Instead, it seemed to be waving a small white sun. Every strike shattered the cold wind and ice, and rippled light and heat in all directions. The umbrella sword in the King of Strange Ghosts' hand was blue, and had the style of the lightsaber in Star Wars. Waves of cold mist and ice shards spread from the blade, as if they were the source of the ice in the long night. The two of them were actually evenly matched. After more than 10 rounds, Erlu was still standing strong. Dr. Peristan was right. The King of Strange Ghosts was transformed from a human. Its swordsmanship skills and style were not much different from Benjen Stark. The only things that changed were its physical attributes and magic power. It was faster, stronger, and more agile. The ice power rippled in a circle of white frost, which quickly melted under the sun. The swords clashed, emitting a soul-piercing explosion. The surrounding people were in pain and could not help but retreat step by step. The red-nosed old man, who had the weakest strength and will, even had blood seeping out of his eyes and ears. But Stannis seemed to be possessed by the god of war. He turned a deaf ear to the soul attack. His movements were still agile, and his swordsmanship was still exquisite. Aunt May's red eyes lit up like light bulbs. The ruby in her throat was so hot that it began to burn her skin. Gotcha! An almost undetectable sound came from the ruby. No one heard it except the red-robed woman. But Dany and Jon looked over almost immediately. Naturally, they could not see the crack on the ruby, but Aunt May's soul fluctuations were too obvious. In order to help Erlu, the red-robed woman had paid a great price. Fortunately, Erlu also had an advantage. His swordsmanship was obviously better than the King of Strange Ghosts. In a situation where his physical attributes were inferior to his opponent, he suppressed the enemy in terms of momentum. To be more direct, Erlu was probably at the 3rd level of lifting light as heavy, similar to Old Ba and Jaime. The King of Strange Ghosts was similar to Big Bear. Their levels and fighting methods were similar. The first level of like an arm wielding a finger, using strength and HP to suppress the enemy. Erlu's Lightbringer cut a hole the size of a child's mouth on the left arm of the King of Strange Ghosts. It made a sizzling sound like when a piece of braised meat was placed in a pot. Before the light blue blood could flow out, it evaporated. At the same time, a piece of frost the size of a human face appeared on the left side of Erlu's waist. An injury for an injury. Erlu grunted and steadied himself. His sword flashed as he continued to attack. God of War. The number 1 god of war of the 7 kingdoms. Seeing the King of Strange Ghosts injured, the spectators seemed to be illuminated by the dawn of victory. They endured the torture of the sword strikes on their souls and shouted enthusiastically. As for Erlu's previous pause, many people with good swordsmanship saw it, but they did not care. Because Stannis was wearing King Aegon's tile steel armor. Tile steel armor was immortal and indestructible. Everyone knew. Then, everyone's spirits rose. Erlu seemed to have found his advantage. His next move was to exchange injury for injury. Facing the King of Strange Ghosts' attacks, he only deflected the force and did not actively block with his sword. Every strike was aimed at the King of Strange Ghosts' vital points. Gradually, Erlu's waist and back were covered in frost, which quickly melted and evaporated. The King of Strange Ghosts' arms, shoulders, chest, waist, thighs and other places were all cut by the shining red sword. The red sword strengthened by the King of Light was indeed sharp. It was no different from when the Dragon Queen used her soul to activate it in Dark Castle. Even though the King of Strange Ghosts was covered in a layer of camouflage ice armor, he was still stabbed. The ice armor could not block it. Dany's expression was serious. She noticed that Erlu was attacked in different places each time. Erlu's swordsmanship was better than the King of Strange Ghosts. He should be able to control the injury for injury part. Then why did he avoid the same part of the armor being attacked repeatedly? Was the tile armor really indestructible? The tile armor was just steel infused with earth-fire magic. It was not even an alloy. Was the King of Strange Ghosts' ice sword not a magic weapon? Dany had a bad feeling about this. But the others did not have her insight. Their thoughts were completely different. 7 gods, Asha's prophecy is really coming true. Stannis is the savior. Peristan, who was carried to the city gate by the guards, said excitedly. The savior, the war god of the 7 kingdoms, the king of the 7 kingdoms. The soldiers on the city wall were about to go crazy. No matter how much they hated the heretic and despised the king of the 7 kingdoms who did not have a throne, at this moment, they were 100% sincere in praising him. They were willing to call him king. I didn't expect the red god to be so strong. This is a miracle. Elaine looked at the sun in the sky and then lowered her head to look at Stannis, who was forcing the king of strange ghosts to retreat. Her expression changed a few times. In the end, she said firmly to the sand snake beside her, "No matter what the others think, when we return to Dorne, I will persuade my father to pledge his loyalty to Stannis. He killed the king of strange ghosts and ended the long night. Dany and Rhys have always rejected our alliance. The one who ends the long night will be the king. This is the Dragon Queen's vow. I think she will keep it." Elder Sister Opaya nodded. Sansa heard this and sighed helplessly. The conflict in her blue eyes turned into determination. The Gold Legion should leave the Stormlands. Give half of the remaining 300,000 tons of food to Stannis. It should be enough to exchange for a piece of land. In recent years, Huggian has withered. Many territories have either lost their lords or been occupied by Lannister's men. I can support Stannis in cleansing Huggian, Riverbend, the Western region and the Royal Territory. There should be hope for the title of Duke in land. The Duke of the 7 Kingdoms, the Targaryen branch in Illyrio's property should be enough. At least Winterfell and the northern region would be preserved after the long night ends. She thought. Millions of ghouls crossed the Great Wall and came suddenly. They came thousands of miles to Winterfell and were ended by the Child of Prophecy. They rise and fall quickly. Is this the power of fate? Then what is the fate of Cersei and I? Seeing this, Jaime had confirmed the difference in swordsmanship between Erlu and the King of Strange Ghosts. After he was completely relieved, he even had the mood to think about his and Cersei's future. I didn't expect the strange ghosts to be so. They are not weak, but their shortcomings are so obvious. Her Majesty the Queen made a loss by letting Stannis challenge them first. The wager is the Iron Throne. Fagon. John Clinton's expression dimmed. War God. The number 1 war god of the 7 kingdoms. The Dragon Queen seemed to be more excited than anyone else. She jumped and cheered, taking 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. But her actions were quickly discovered and stopped. When Dany wanted to take another step closer to the battlefield, her cloak was pulled by someone. Turning around, she saw a short and muscular knight of red heart. Together with Richard and Gordifalin, he was known as the 3 heroes of Red Heart. Clutton Sange. Yes, they were Erlu's 3 most loyal and powerful noble knights. Dragon Queen, I know what you want to do. But now His Majesty Stannis is about to complete Asha's prophecy and fulfill his promise with you. Please don't disturb him. To be more direct, don't even think about taking the King of Strange Ghosts' head. The short, bald knight bared his rotten brown teeth and advised in a low voice. You idiot! Dany used a soul strike to make him dizzy. She turned around, but her cloak was tightly held by Clutton and she couldn't move. I won't let you go. The short knight shook his head and gritted his teeth. He actually took a soul suppression strike head-on. Scram! Dany was furious. She changed to a more powerful soul extinguisher strike. Her soul attack was like a divine sword, slashing between his eyebrows. Awoo, he cried out. The other 4 knights of Red Heart were alerted and came over. Crack, while they were entangled, a sudden change occurred on the battlefield. Chapter 8:14. Before the Deviants approached Winterfell last night, Erlu had received the news. He had enough time to adjust himself to his best condition. Tonight I will fulfill my destiny. I will end the Deviant Ghost King, end the long night, and bring summer back to the world. Stannis thought as he looked at himself in the mirror as Melisandre tied the ruby chains around his wrists and neck. He had reason to be confident, because the red-robed woman saw his end in the fire. He definitely would not die today. If he did not die, then the one who would die would be the Deviant Ghost King. I am with you. The red-robed woman was like a vine, wrapping around his lean and strong body from behind. Her red lips wandered along his exposed skin. Her red eyes were shining, and the ruby at her throat shone brightly. He felt heat rising from his wrists and neck. In the mirror opposite him, the 3 rubies on the man's neck and wrist shone brightly. I am with you. Tonight, glory belongs to us. Stannis murmured. These were not empty words. Her spiritual power and magic power entered his body through the ruby, swimming under his skin, bone marrow, and mind. In the third dimension, they were still two separate people. In another dimension, their bodies and souls were almost one. He did not go to the battlefield alone. Melisandre fulfilled the promise she had made to him on Dragonstone Island many years ago. I am with you. We will meet the final fate together, and fulfill Asha's prophecy together. Lord Savior. That year, that night, she made him understand his true destiny, and set a new goal for him in life. To save the world. It was also that night that they became one. He was 30 years old, and his daughter was 5 years old. But it was the first time he experienced the joy of love between a man and a woman. It was a strange feeling that could not be found in Celis. He was fascinated by it but not intoxicated. He needed her to help him fulfill his responsibility. He pushed her away, rejecting her eagerness. I want to be in my best condition to meet the deviant Ghost King. Melisandre was like a dead snake, loosening from his body. Tonight, you will fulfill the ancient prophecy. She smiled as she put on his armor. They went to the king's gate hand in hand. When Dany Rise faced the dark sky and loudly challenged King Strange Ghost, Stannis was already prepared for battle. However, King Ygoutte wanted to test the qualifications of the humans, so he pushed the challenge to the next day at noon. Stannis was a little discouraged. Then, with the red sword in hand, he went on a killing spree on the western city wall. He killed 10, 50, 100. In the end, he killed 200 ghouls. He felt tired. Jon Snow advised him to go back and rest. He agreed. There were still 6 hours before noon. He returned to the castle and picked up the red-haired priestess. After having a good time, he fell onto the bed and slept soundly. Including the time he spent fighting with Melisandre, it had been less than 2 hours. The western city wall had fallen, and he had woken up from his deep sleep. Seeing that the 2 megalosaurus had reclaimed the city wall, he felt relieved and returned to his bed. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the ceiling, unable to fall asleep. So he tore open her red robe again half an hour later. Just as he lay down and fell into a deep sleep, the fire in the fireplace, the candles on the table, and the torches on the wall all went out. The sudden extreme cold was like Melisandre's tongue, licking his skin and giving him goosebumps. Then it entered his body and made his soul tremble. He suddenly sat up in bed. It's here. Yes, it's here. The red-robed woman changed into another red robe and snapped her fingers. The fireplace, torches, and candles all burst into sparks and burned again. Go back to sleep. There's still time before the appointed time, she said gently to him. I can't sleep. He decided to get up. I'll help you sleep. She leaned over again. He pushed her away and said with a serious face, It's here to challenge me. I can't avoid it. With Dany Rise here, Winterfell can hold on for another 3 hours. Let it wait a little longer and it will mess up its emotions. Perhaps that's why it came early, the red-robed woman said as she hugged him. It succeeded. Saving the world is the greatest responsibility in the world. I can't calm down when I think of it just outside the city. Stannis let her put on the armor for him. But after he was fully dressed, he hesitated for a moment and said to her, Let's watch the fire one last time and see the result of this battle. Melisandre paused and asked, Haven't we seen it before? A new day has begun, he reminded her. The red-robed woman suddenly remembered that she hadn't made a prophecy for herself today. Every day, the moment before the sun rose, she would make a prophecy about her life and death. There had been no exception for hundreds of years. For Melisandre, a day began before the sun rose, around 6 or 5 o'clock in the morning, not 12. 12 o'clock at night was when the Shadowbinders and Blood Shamans were the most active. How could it be counted as the beginning of a day? She had also made a prophecy yesterday that she wouldn't die until the next morning. So she was 100% sure that Stannis would fulfill the ancient prophecy. End the long night. Because their fates were connected, they shared life and glory. If she didn't die, he wouldn't die either. There was only one reason why she was so sure. Like Door God, Dragon Queen, and Sheep Egg, she had her own talent. In this era, if one didn't have a powerful talent, they wouldn't be able to call themselves a boss. Without a doubt, Melisandre was a boss. Her talent was prophecy. She could foresee all the death threats she would encounter in a day. She could see the cause and process of her death in the fire and change her fate. For hundreds of years, she had been a little holy prostitute in the Red God Temple. She was a prostitute trained by the church. She served the elders of the temple. She sold outside the temple to attract customers to make money. Because she was a slave, she didn't have to be paid. Awesome. How many life and death situations had she gone through to become a demigod whose name shook Asia? She was able to live until now because of her talent of prophecy that never went wrong. She thought that the foreign ghost king would come at midnight and challenge the child of prophecy at midnight. It postponed the duel to noon the next day. At 6 o'clock in the morning, she was entangled with Stannis and then fell asleep. For the first time in her life, she forgot the habit that she had persisted for hundreds of years. Let's take a look. She took his hand to the fireplace. With a gentle wave of her hand, the fire burned brighter and a scene appeared in front of them. Erlu's heart sank. After a round, when the people of Winterfell were cheering for the foreign ghost king's injury, Stannis discovered another terrifying fact. The ice sword had left a scratch on the tile steel armor. This was nothing. The myth of the tile steel armor being indestructible had been broken by Lalo's doppelganger at Eastwatch. At that time, the monster with the head of a bull and the body of a snake had used its tiger claws to leave deep scratches on Dany Rise's armor and the Unsullied's tile steel shield. After that, he had seen her use a hammer to repair the armor and shield in the Winterfell blacksmith shop. In Dany Rise's words, the people of Valeglia had injected high-level earth fire magic into the steel. In essence, the tile steel was just steel with magic. Magic was incomprehensible to normal people, but extraordinary people were in control of extraordinary power, and the gods were the most powerful extraordinary people. Obviously, the magic of the tile steel armor would be much less effective against the gods. With this mental preparation, Stannis was not worried about the sword marks on the armor. Just like how an iron sword would leave a sword mark on a steel armor, few knights were worried about their armor being cut by the enemy during battle. By the time the enemy cut through his armor, he would have killed him countless times, or been killed countless times. But the King of Strange Ghosts' ice sword not only cut through the tile steel armor, but he also felt that the area frozen by the ice seemed to have lost some magic. This was not an illusion. The tile steel armor was not only strong, but also had the magic immunity, effect to reduce magic damage, and was even immune to evil spells. Fighting with the King of Strange Ghosts was not simple. Other than the soul attack caused by the collision of weapons, there was also the cold and dark power around it. It was like fighting with a pile of shit. You would definitely be stung by the shit. Fighting with the King of Strange Ghosts, who represented cold, dark, and death, you would be attacked by the evil power at all times. The Lightbringer in Stannis' hand was also emitting light and heat that hurt the King of Strange Ghosts. He himself could not withstand the active and passive evil power from the King of Strange Ghosts. The tile steel armor filtered out some of it, and the rest was absorbed by Melisandre's soul power. Then the Light King's divine power helped to repair the parts that were attacked by the evil power. After taking a hit from the King of Strange Ghosts on the left side of his waist, Stannis keenly felt that the armor on the left side of his waist had completely lost its defense against the evil power. It was like a rainy day. You were walking in the rain with an umbrella. Suddenly, there was a hole in the umbrella and the rainwater leaked out. Stannis did not know what happened to the armor, but he understood his current situation. He used different parts of the armor to block the King of Strange Ghosts' attacks, and at the same time used his Lightbringer to deal the most damage to the enemy. There were more and more people cheering for him on the city walls, and the cheers became louder and louder. They called him the God of War, the Savior, the King. He finally received everyone's recognition. It felt wonderful, and he hoped that this moment would last forever. Maybe before the armor completely breaks, I can get rid of the King of Strange Ghosts. After all, I have cut it so many times. He thought excitedly. Then, he saw the first expression on his opponent's face. The King of Strange Ghosts' pale face that was covered with strange swirls showed a mocking smile. It was very faint, very light, but it was shocking. The King of Strange Ghosts was mocking him? Fool! His voice came with the wind, and then kata. The King of Strange Ghosts' ice sword was a one-handed sword, and the Lightbringer was a two-handed sword. The moment Stannis swung his sword to block, the King of Strange Ghosts did something that was almost impossible in a battle between knights. A palm hit his chest. This was not a Wuxia drama, and there was no such thing as palm power. Unless there was a special situation where he could push the opponent down with a palm, reaching out his hand was a huge flaw, and there was the danger of losing his arm. The King of Strange Ghosts' thin, wrinkled, and pale left hand pressed against Stannis' chest, and the tile armor that once belonged to Aegon immediately froze with a layer of light blue ice, and then cracked and exploded into countless pieces. The strong sense of danger was like hearing a group of women's voices outside the door when he was squatting in a public toilet. It fell on him so suddenly, so clearly, and made his body tremble and his scalp tingle. The ice spread over his body like a spider's web, freezing him into an ice sculpture. I'm going to die. He had an epiphany. I'm not afraid of death. I fulfilled my duty as the King of the Seven Kingdoms and the Savior. Although I didn't succeed. No, I can still think now. I still have help. It can't end like this. I can't give up. Give up the last chance to drag it to hell with me. Just like what he saw in the fireplace, he had an epiphany. Chapter 8:15. When Erlu was hit by the Xianming divine palm, and was slashed by the ice sword, his armor shattered and fell off. Before the people on the city wall who were cheering for their savior could react, Dragon Queen used a series of soul-extinguishing strikes and knocked down the Red Heart Knight who was arguing with her. Then the 5 dragon spirits and the sword god's divinity. Hey demons and ghosts, everyone has the right to kill them. Every syllable in Dragon Queen's roar was a soul-extinguishing strike under the 5 dragon spirits. They were planning to attack together. Caw caw caw. The sky was suddenly covered by a black cloud of crows. A huge will solidified, like Sun Wukong's golden cudgel, fell from the sky and smashed on King of the Strange Ghost's head. Ah, I've been waiting for you. King of the Strange Ghost retracted his left hand from Erlu and roared into the sky. His roar was like a storm of needles, piercing the souls of the humans in all directions. I am ice, I am darkness, I am order and eternity. King of the Strange Ghost roared. Ice spread under his feet, freezing everything in its path. Darkness was like a coffin lid, pressing down on Winterfell. The sun in the sky swayed and dimmed. Torches, braziers, and even wildfires were suddenly extinguished. This time it didn't seem to be a fire-forbidden domain. The laws of darkness and ice were recklessly manifested, forming a small world that didn't allow light and fire to exist. Dragon Queen, who was condensing a fireball to prepare for a big move, felt it the most. Big Black and Little Green flapped their wings and floated in the air. Little White jumped on the city wall and stretched his neck. The 3 Megalosaurus dragon flames gathered above Dragon Queen's head. A giant fireball was about to take shape, but the dragon flames in the air were rapidly losing heat and fire magic every second, and the fire control spell was almost ineffective. The reason the dragon flames could condense into a fireball was because Dany was using the fire control spell. Like kneading dough, she kneaded the long noodles into a ball of dough. In the end, the fire control spell was still fire witchcraft. King of the Strange Ghosts' ice and darkness domain had changed the rules. Fire witchcraft was like a high-precision machine under the rules of the world. When a physical constant was changed, the machine would malfunction. What's more, the change in the rules was now directed at fire and light. Therefore, the fire control technique failed. The spherical dragon flame was sometimes deflated, sometimes elliptical, and sometimes twisted into a triangle. The Dragon Queen seemed to have become the worst fire sorcerer. What was Melisandre doing? Why wasn't she maintaining the flame domain around her? Dany turned her head and saw the red-robed woman screaming in pain with a ferocious look on her face. Her wrinkles were like the white frost on a glass window in winter, quickly covering her face. Her long bronze-red hair was visibly withering and turning white. Her exposed skin was wrinkled like chicken skin. She was aging. Her big red eyes were dim, and the ruby on her neck was flickering like a breathing lamp on Ultraman's chest. The cracks were clearly visible. Melisandre's missing life force, magic power, and soul power were all transferred into Erlu's body. Dany was surprised to see that Erlu, whom she thought had died, actually moved. Ka-kaboom! Erlu's wrist and neck were emitting a bright red light, and the ice layer that froze him exploded. The red sword was still hot. Erlu stabbed at the king of strange ghosts, who raised his head and screamed. 3,000 crows formed a strange anti-spiral array, and were still circling above his head. Danny's soul destruction slash never stopped, and the three sides' wills continued to collide. Seeing that Erlu was going to kill him while he was down, the king of strange ghosts spoke. The change happened quickly, almost in the blink of an eye. Only the dragon queen, who had drawn her sword and ran in front of the king of strange ghosts, saw the entire process clearly. The god of cold descended, the crows scattered, and the king of strange ghosts regained his mobility. In the midst of the shocking change, Erlu seemed to know what was going to happen next. He changed his action of stabbing his sword halfway. Or rather, he didn't plan to attack the king of strange ghosts with a straight stab. It was a feint. He flipped his wrist, and the red sword reversed its direction. The flashing red and white blade pointed at himself. The sword was extremely fast and decisive, as if he had rehearsed it countless times in his heart. The red sword also pierced his chest like tofu with a fork. The blade slid past his spine and through his back. It didn't touch any bones in the entire process, and easily pierced into the king of strange ghosts, who was stabbing at him from behind. Erlu was stabbed twice, and the king of strange ghosts was stabbed once. The king of strange ghosts stood behind Erlu. The 3-foot-long ice sword pierced through Erlu's back. Erlu's Lightbringer stabbed through the gap between his left ribs, through his body, and slanted upwards into the king of strange ghosts' heart. The two were like Jack and Rose at the bow of the Titanic, one in front and one behind, hugging each other. Erlu also saw Danny, who was rushing over, but he couldn't speak. The red sword entered Erlu's body. It was like stuffing a sun into the king of strange ghosts' body, causing it to scream and evaporate. The ice sword entered Erlu's body like stuffing a black hole into his body. In an instant, it absorbed his heat and vitality. But while the king of strange ghosts was still struggling, Erlu was already on the verge of death. The frost started from his heart and spread to all parts of his body. His upper and lower lips were frozen together by ice crystals. He could only look at Danny with his blue eyes. His gaze fell on the hilt of the red sword in his chest. There was still a section that hadn't pierced in. Because of the loss of its owner, the red sword's light dimmed visibly. His eyes blinked twice at Danny. "Come here, stab it in, don't let it escape." Danny didn't know why, but she immediately understood his thoughts. Before she could react, Erlu used the last of his strength to look at the red-robed woman in the distance. The ruby on her neck was completely broken and fell off. Her thick red hair became gray and fragile, like dry straw. Her rosy cheeks were wrinkled. Her beautiful face turned white, and the peerless female priest became an old woman with one foot in the grave in the blink of an eye. Erlu's blue eyes dimmed little by little, and were completely extinguished. Danny's heart beat violently. Looking at the king of strange ghosts behind Erlu, she gritted her teeth and stepped forward. Holding the hilt of the red sword, she summoned her magic power and divine soul power to activate the runes in the sword. He pushed Erlu's body and used all his strength to push it back. Boom! The red sword, which had already dimmed, emitted endless light and heat again. Ouch! The king of strange ghosts, who had just broken free from the red sword's blade, was pierced in the chest again. He let out an ear-piercing scream. Danny's expression suddenly changed. Her divinity, soul, and magic power poured into the red sword like a flood that had opened a valve. It was as if the red sword was a straw and she was a can of milk tea. There was an invisible greedy mouth sucking through the straw. When Danny listened to Erlu's last wish and was ready to give the king of strange ghosts the final blow with the red sword, she was already prepared to permanently lose part of her soul and magic power. Just like last time in Dark Castle, she had permanently lost about 1/20th of her wizard power and 1/100th of her soul after only 2 swings of the sword. This time it was even more terrifying. In less than a second she lost 5% of her divinity, soul, and magic power. Even the Song of Fire, which was created in the fire, seemed to be disappearing. This wasn't normal. She was now a demigod, a dual-element demigod. She was 10 times, no 100 times stronger than when she had just learned meditation in Dark Castle. This meant that the consumption of the red sword was hundreds of times higher than before. She wanted to stop pouring magic power and let go of her right hand holding the sword, but she couldn't do it. The sword hilt seemed to be covered with glue and stuck to her palm. However, her struggle and resistance weren't useless. Without her cooperation, the speed of her essence loss decreased by 10 times. Even if it decreased by 10 times, she would wither and die in less than a minute. Lalo, you're tricking me at a time like this. Danny's soul let out an angry roar. The two dragon spirits, Little Red and Little Gold, moved from the king of strange ghosts to the twisted and greedy evil spirit inside the red sword. This is your fate. Don't struggle. Look, the king of strange ghosts is about to break free. A grand, bright, warm, and holy voice came from the red sword. It seemed to be able to cleanse the soul. This wasn't Lalo, the shadow demon, but the king of light, who represented heat and life. He was more holy than the mother. This holy father stabbed her in the back. It hurts. Chapter 8:16. Damn it, why is there so little of my soul and divinity? Where did the rest go? In the space of the 7 gods' faith, Dragon Queen was exasperated as she roared at Little Sun, who was tied up in chains. Of course you have to swallow the meat in your mouth. Do you want to keep it in your mouth and chew it? The King of Light mocked. Danny had lost 30% of her soul, divinity, and divine power. However, she had only recovered 10% after burning the sword soul evil spirit. In other words, because she had held the red sword for about 2 minutes, she had permanently lost 20% of her soul, 20% of her divinity, and 20% of her divine power. Permanent loss could not be recovered by meditating in a short period of time. How could Danny not be enraged and mad? It seems that the chairman is right. We have to settle our internal problems before we can fight external problems. Danny looked at the King of Light as if she was looking at a dead man. Chairman, who is it? The King of Light was confused. Without waiting for Danny to answer, he was also angry. Only the light emissary can kill the King of Deviant Ghosts, but you destroyed it? I only hate that I did not destroy it the first time I met it, Danny said coldly. The long night is temporary. When the world finishes falling, a new era will begin. But if the King of Deviant Ghosts does not die, when it kills all the living, the world will fall into a balanced, eternal dark and cold abyss of death. Your cowardice and cowardice have destroyed the entire human era, the entire world of light. You are a sinner of humanity, a sinner of the world. The King of Light's voice was loud and filled with a vast and holy aura, like the judgment of the King of Gods. Very good, let's do that. Danny smiled. You are crazy. The King of Light was shocked. Cough cough. Evil God Lalo almost destroyed the entire human era and the world of light because of his cowardice and cowardice. He is a sinner of humanity, a sinner of the world, a scum of the true gods, and the greatest shame of the transcendent world. Looking at the dumbfounded King of Light, Danny smiled coldly and said, "This will be the evaluation of the deceased evil god Lalo in the history books many years later. You're not crazy, but you're going crazy soon. Now you can only satisfy yourself through lust," the King of Light mocked. "Look at this. You should know what it is, right?" Danny turned her hand and took out a bowl-sized golden jelly. Sensing the faint ripples of the law of light from the jelly, the Light King cried out, "How is this possible? This is the destiny of the Lady of Light." Where did you get it?" "The destiny of the Maiden of Light?" Danny was shocked. Destiny was a mission bestowed by the heavens, and not everyone could accomplish it. Bestowing a mission was equivalent to bestowing the talent or ability to accomplish it. Therefore, things like the Savior's destiny and the Lady of Light's destiny were talents or abilities granted by the will of the universe. Of course, destiny was very complicated. It included but was not limited to talent and divinity. It also involved some authority bestowed by the heavens. Xiaolingyun once said, "There is only one stone of talent in the world. Chao Zijian alone has 8 stones and I have 1 stone. Since ancient times we've shared 1 stone." From the literal meaning, the total number of literary talents, since ancient times was fixed. Xiaolingyun took 10%, Chao Ji took 80%, and the remaining 10% was divided between Wang Shiji, Li Bai Du Fu, and other literati before the Southern Song dynasty. Good heavens! That Xie guy was really shameless. His bragging was through the roof. It was just a matter of fact. Literary talent could also be considered fate. If someone gathered all of the one stone of talent, he would not only increase his talents, but more importantly, he would monopolize the responsibility of bringing resplendent art and culture to the world, bestowed by the will of the heavens. Without destiny, one would not be able to contribute to the world. Dani burned the sword soul evil spirit. Of course, not only did she recover the 10% that belonged to her, the evil spirit's spirituality was also not lacking. The strange spirituality solidified into a golden jelly. It immediately reminded Dani of the scene when she saved John. The divinity, spirituality, and precepts left behind after Lalo's soul was burned were mixed into a ball. Its aura was different from the golden jelly, but similar. Therefore, Dani guessed that it was destiny related to light. However, she thought that it was a part of the soul essence left behind by the Light King and the Sword Soul evil spirit. She did not expect it to be related to the Lady of Light. Who's the Sword Soul in the Lightbringer? It's that evil spirit with a twisted will and only greedy nature left, Dani asked. The Light King's mental power fluctuated rapidly, showing that his heart was extremely unsettled. Her destiny has not completely disappeared. Dani's expression changed. Nisha? Why does Nisha have the destiny of being the Lady of Light? There was an evil spirit sealed in the Lightbringer. She had discovered it when she first activated it. According to legend, Yesurahai had his wife Nisha open her chest and stabbed a smoking iron sword that had just been taken from the stove into her beating heart. The sword immediately absorbed all of her blood, soul, strength, and courage, and finally became the Lightbringer. Therefore, regarding the identity of the evil spirit, Dani first thought of Nisha. She was once Nisha. However, 8,000 years later, she changed to Yesurahai. The Light King's tone was much gentler. It seemed that he had become very easy to talk to for some reason. He explained the evolution of the sword soul completely. Nisha's soul and strength were the energy to activate the red sword. However, without a source, the water would definitely dry up. After the end of the long night, the red sword's power weakened day by day. Nisha's soul was also on the verge of dying. Yesurahai gave his destiny and the favor of the universe after he saved the world to me. Only the remnant of his soul with all his memories was left. He sealed himself into the divine sword in exchange for the release of Nisha's soul. There was more than one long night, and more than one foreign ghost king. Yesurahai hoped that his wife's soul would no longer be tortured by the extraction of her power. However, he also understood that humans needed the red sword. He was a true hero, a hero of humans, a hero of the world. Lalo looked at the expressionless dragon queen and sighed. Dani sneered. With a sigh, the Light King continued. His last request to me was to replace Nisha with himself and become the source of the red sword's power. Of course, at that time he had nothing but his memories. Everything he had belonged to me. That remnant of his soul with only memories and thoughts was not qualified to be the source of the red sword's divinity. As you said, the sword soul. Hence, Nisha's soul core was freed from its shackles and reincarnated. The soul shell that retained the last of its power was left in the red sword, and merged with Yesurahai's remnant soul. I thought that Nisha's destiny had been reincarnated with her soul core. Even if it was left in the soul shell after 8,000 years, it should have been worn out. The Light King's voice was filled with doubt. The crystal in the center of a human's eye with all its memories was the soul core. The spiritual sea outside the soul core was the soul shell. The soul core and the soul shell were similar to the 3 souls and 7 spirits. Perhaps due to the different laws of the universe, Dani had not found anyone in this world who could divide their soul into 10 parts. After a person died, the soul core entered the world of death. The soul shell was like the body remaining in the body. Hence, even if a night watcher's soul went to heaven, his body could still become a ghoul that retained its memories and battle experience. If a person died, the soul core and the soul shell were still combined, forming a ghost that wandered between the mortal world and the world of death. Why does Nisha have the destiny of the Lady of Light? Dani asked. Nisha was able to become the sword soul of the light messenger. Of course, there's something special about her. The Light King was vague, as if he did not want to delve into this topic. Dani looked at him deeply and asked, since the sword soul of the demon sword has been replaced by Yasuo and Ahai, Why has it become an evil spirit that is devoid of humanity and twisted without any nightmares? The light messenger is not the demon's sword. The Light King refuted with a straight face. It represents the most noble and great human emotions. It's a sword of love and sacrifice. Nisha sacrificed herself for love without any regrets. She was even happy to be able to fight alongside her lover. The light messenger would let Yasuo and Ahai feel the endless love at all times. That kind of supreme human emotion is a real and magical power that can stimulate all his potential and make his will as strong as iron. He is not afraid of any soul damage. After Nisha reincarnated, the red sword was only left with Yasuo and Ahai's remnant soul. 8,000 years of loneliness and emptiness hollowed out his former sincerity, kindness, greatness, and love. In the end, he went from being kind and pure to being greedy and twisted. If you follow your fate and infect him with love and sacrifice, the evil spirit can also become a holy spirit. At that time, the light messenger will once again convey love, sacrifice, light, kindness, and all the other good things to the world. I only see your greed, ruthlessness, shamelessness, and evil, Danny said coldly. Actually, I am very principled in my actions. Among the gods, no god is more principled than me. The Light King sighed. The principle of sacrificing others for yourself, Danny said sarcastically. When I ask for something in return, I must first give something in return. The Light King said in a low voice. Yasuo and Ahai were split into two in the end. Other than the remnant soul with memories, the rest almost became a part of my soul. This is a fact. But I helped him forge the red sword and taught him magic and martial arts. In the end, he was able to defeat Long Night. My help was indispensable. I gave and received in return. This is a matter of course. It's the same this time. I helped you end the life of the deviant Ghost King and finally brought light to the world. Your soul and destiny are my rewards. What's wrong with that? Isn't it the responsibility of the true gods to save the world? You just have to push the responsibility onto the humans. Danny found the Light King's strange idea inconceivable. What you mean is that we true gods should disregard life and death, disregard the gains and losses, and let you humans enjoy the fruits of our labor. The Light King asked in return, aren't we fighting the deviant ghosts under Winterfell? How can we enjoy the fruits of others' labor? The true gods and humans each have their own duties, sacrifice, and work together. This is the right way. Danny said coldly. This is what humans are like. The Light King laughed softly. Your words, your actions, and even you are the epitome of human selfishness and self-righteousness. In this era, humans are the main characters of the world. If you don't work hard, who will? If the master of the era doesn't sacrifice himself, who will? If you think it's natural for me to work hard for the humans for free, then why didn't I work hard for the other races in the previous era? If I worked hard for the ancient races wouldn't be eliminated by the world. If they didn't leave, how could you humans become the main characters of the era? The world has hundreds of millions of years of history. How many races and how many main characters of the era didn't work hard or sacrifice themselves? They deserve to be eliminated. What's the logic of blaming the true gods for not being willing to die for you? Chapter 8:17. The Light King Lalo's series of complaints seemed to be very reasonable, and Danny was temporarily speechless. But after a moment, she found a reason to refute. Are humans not willing to sacrifice? Didn't Stannis sacrifice himself? I knew that activating the red sword would cost me a part of my soul, but I was determined to sacrifice myself. You were too greedy and wanted to take my life. You still have the face to say that. How can it be considered a sacrifice if you don't lose your life? From Nisa, Yasuo, Ahai to Stannis, these heroes, which one of them didn't know that they would die but still went to die. The problem is that I am stronger than them. I can kill the king of deviant ghosts without dying. What about after killing the king of deviant ghosts? Summoning the sun and stopping the world from falling? Isn't it hard? Your sacrifice is the price I pay for helping you humans save the world. This has nothing to do with your strength. Just like the roast chicken in the hotel, each roast chicken costs 5 copper coins, and the roast chicken must be extraordinarily fat. Some are fatter, some are thinner. I took out 5 copper coins, so you should give me a whole chicken. You are a very fat chicken, that's true, But you can't just give me a chicken butt. Maybe the next time I help humans save the world, I can only buy a skinny chicken for the same 5 copper coins, but I won't complain. Fuck you. Danny clenched her fist and said coldly, how about I give you 5 copper coins and buy your whole chicken? 5 copper coins is easy to say, but it means that I will try my best to save the world once. Can you do it? The Light King sneered. Bring me the big pot of chicken first. When I finish eating and have the strength, the task of saving the world will have nothing to do with you. Sigh, you're really stubborn. I tried my best to tell you the story of the Light Emissary and the responsibility of the protagonist of this era, but you didn't even understand the slightest bit of a hero's fearless and sacrificial spirit? The Light King lamented with an emotional voice like a holy father. Danny held up the golden jelly and said lightly, don't pretend. I know you said so much because you are afraid. What am I afraid of? The Light King looked at the jelly, and his tone was slightly unnatural. You're afraid that I'll fuse it into my soul. The mandate of heaven is only useful to those who are compatible with it. I am the Light King, so only I can use it. You are the mandate of First Flame Ember, so you are not compatible with it, the Light King said seriously. You said that I'm Nissa's reincarnation. Danny smiled. Reincarnation? The Light King sighed and said sincerely, you may have misunderstood the concept of reincarnation. Currently, there is no clear evidence that a soul can naturally start a second life. I have studied the field of death for hundreds of millions of years, and discovered that every life has a most essential label, which is the life imprint. Every new life would give birth to an independent life imprint. A true reincarnation should retain the original life imprint in the new life. But the reality was that no Grim Reaper could do this. Even the god of frost, the most powerful of the gods of death, could not do it even after he had sung the complete song of death. The so-called reincarnation was just 2 people with similar life imprints. You are a stranger, a Grim Reaper among the believers of the 7 gods. You should understand this. Haha, you said 99% of the truth but twisted the truth at the most crucial point. Danny smiled. What did I say wrong? The Light King asked in a low voice. About reincarnation, the door god has already explained to me that it is not the life imprint that is similar at all. It is only the mandate of heaven and the fluctuations of the soul that are similar. If I am Nissa's reincarnation, except for me, her mandate of heaven would only be a high-level tonic for others. It would have no special effect. That piece of wood is not even a Grim Reaper. What does he know? The Light King said disapprovingly. How about this? I am the Light King. You give me the mandate of Lady of Light, and I will return your spirit, divinity, and divine power? He suggested sincerely. Crunch, Danny did not say anything and swallowed the golden jelly in one gulp. She did not feel hungry, but she felt a sense of satisfaction as if she had finally eaten her fill. Buzz. Her soul was expanding, and her body was getting bigger and bigger. There was also a faint golden glow from inside out. In an instant, Danny's soul was like a huge human-shaped sun, lying across the space of faith. The effect is so good. Feeling the power of her spirit that had more than doubled, and the strange fluctuations of power in the depths of her soul, Danny's grievance from losing 20% of her spirit, divinity, and divine power was swept away. The Light King could no longer maintain the temperament of a holy father. He said coldly, do you know what you are doing? I know. The mandate of Lady of Light is very special. It allows me to comprehend the law of light naturally. It is possible that it is more powerful than the Song of Light produced when the sun was artificially forged. So, as long as I work hard, I will be able to sing the Song of Light one day, Danny said confidently. Actually, her confidence was a pretense for the sake of the Laser King. What she really felt now was helplessness and powerlessness. She had just started learning the Song of Fire and Song of Wind. She had almost no time to practice the Lone River Water Wizard that she had learned from Prime Minister Turtle. Because of her position as a stranger, and in order to complete the legendary Song of Ice and Fire, she had to find time to study the law of death. She was so busy that she had a headache. She really had no interest in the law of light. If 1,000 years or 10,000 years passed, she might try to complete the Song of Light and Darkness when she had gathered the 4 elements, ice and fire. If you dare to have any ideas about the Song of Light, we will fight to the death. I will no longer care about long night and frost's god. From now on, I will use all my strength to hunt you down, the Light King said coldly. To be honest, Danny was a little scared. Was it worth it to fight a dog for a pile of poop? The dog needed that pile of fresh and warm poop to fill its stomach. She was just picking it up to fertilize the field. Now that the sun has shattered, the Song of Light should slowly disappear. You don't want me to take the Song of Light, which means that the Song of Light is still in your hands. What did you do? Danny didn't look scared at all. She had reached the realm of lifting something heavy as if it were light. She was very strong among the young people. At least when he was her age. His swordsmanship was not as good as hers. However, Binjin was not weak either. He had more strength, faster speed, more accurate dynamic vision, and his body was better than humans in all aspects. But now, Dragon Queen's fighting style had completely broken his understanding. Whoosh/boom. He felt a blue shadow flash in front of him. Dragon Queen's cape. A large amount of ice chips appeared on the King of Strange Ghost's chest. He flew 7 or 8 meters away and crashed heavily into the shield wall. There were even 2 tall and strong savage warriors who could not hold their oak shields. Like bowling pins that had been hit, they flipped a few times on the frost-covered ground. Fuck, this is like a father beating his son. She was hiding her strength before. Jamie was stunned. And this was just the beginning. Dragon Queen seemed to be very dissatisfied with the result of the sudden attack. A string of bright red flames appeared in her left hand, igniting the entire wide white blade. Whoosh, like a gust of wind, she crossed the distance of 7 or 8 meters. She raised the flaming sword and stabbed it into the heart of the King of Strange Ghosts, who was struggling to get up. Chapter 8:18. Few King of Strange Ghosts laid on the oak shield. The confusion in his eyes disappeared and he let out a long breath. He activated the fireproof domain again, and placed the ice sword in front of his chest where the red sword had pierced through. Dragon Queen's lightning sword was only 20 centimeters away from the ice sword. The flames on the sword were also extinguished. Just when everyone thought that there would be a ding sound of weapons colliding, the tip of the white sword pierced the blade of the ice sword. Chi! Like a sudden breeze or a falling willow leaf, the white sword moved forward 35 centimeters at an even faster speed, stabbing into King of Strange Ghost's left eye. The cold eyeball flashed with blue light and exploded like a small light bulb. The sword continued to move downwards. Dragon Queen exerted force with both hands, trying to pierce through his skull. Nice! Jamie was dazzled. He shouted excitedly before the white sword stabbed into his eye. Ouch! King of Strange Ghosts howled. The ice sword in front of his chest sliced horizontally at Danny's left leg. Danny seemed to have predicted his movements. She stepped on the ground with her iron boots and did a 180-degree front flip. During the entire process, her right hand never left the hilt of her sword. She even transferred all the pressure from her body to the tip of the white sword. When she landed on the ground, she landed right on top of King of Strange Ghost's head. Before King of Strange Ghosts could stab back, her iron boots hit his right arm. If it was a normal night, this kick would have shattered his right arm. However, the ice armor on his right arm didn't shatter. Just now, Stannis had used the red sword to easily break through the ice armor. It was as simple as a sword cutting through leather armor. Oh, King of Foreign Ghosts howled. The cold wind, snow, and the surrounding darkness were like thousands of living things that heard the king's command and quickly surged towards it. Crack, 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 the white sword met with resistance. Ice shot out from King of Strange Ghost's eye sockets and froze the tip of the sword in his eye socket. The light blue frost crawled on the sword like a black mamba. In a short while, it froze Dragon Queen's iron gloves on the sword hilt. Shit! Danny's expression turned ugly. She could clearly sense that her white sword was losing some sort of uniqueness. More intuitively speaking, because tile steel was filled with high-energy flames, it was indestructible in terms of physics and could destroy evil in terms of magic. Now the power of frost was counteracting the power of the earth fire within the iron sword. Mortal fire, wildfire, dragon fire, earth fire, sun, embers of the first flame in the heart of the earth, first flame of creation, PS. The energy levels of the 7 flames rose one after another. The earth fire power in the tile was a 4th level fire magic power, but it was still negated by the strange ghost king's ice power. King Deviant Ghost's ice power was even stronger than earth fire. Then, something that made everyone's eyeballs pop out happened. Dragon Queen's right hand gripped the hilt of her sword and swung it left and right. The blade of the sword made a horrifying sound as it rubbed against King of Strange Ghost's eye sockets. She raised her left foot and stomped on King of Strange Ghost's nose, mouth, cheek, and right eye with the heel of her long iron boot. Bam, bam, bam. The bridge of his nose was broken, his teeth fell out, and light blue icy liquid flowed out of his tightly shut right eye. Oh, King Strange Ghost cried out in pain. A layer of ice crystals began to cover his entire body. Everyone was dumbfounded. The shield bearers near Dragon Queen regained their senses and waved their dragon teeth blades. Like chopping vegetables, they left small holes in King Strange Ghost's ice crystal armor. Suddenly, Dragon Queen raised her head and looked at the dark land in the distance. Her expression changed as she shouted, "Quick, retreat quickly. The Deviant Ghost army has moved out. Retreat to the city gate. Dragon Queen, we are not afraid. Let's fight it out with those bastards." Tormund shouted. Dany snatched a steel shield from an unsullied and snapped, "Bastard! How can you be a Chiliarch? I told you to retreat, so hurry up and retreat." Retreat. Retreat to the city gate immediately. Old Ba, Clinton, Jaime, and the others suddenly remembered the battle plan. They stopped insisting and immediately called for everyone to retreat. Dany stayed where she was and continued to step on King Strange Ghost's face with her iron boots. She stomped King Strange Ghost's pale and shriveled face into a plate of juicy dumpling fillings. She couldn't even tell his nose, eyes, and mouth apart. But King Strange Ghost was still howling. A layer of frost climbed onto her tall iron boots. Dragon Queen activated her divine power and immediately dispelled the frost. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, 7 to 8 5-foot-long ice swords attacked like lightning. They were so fast that they barely left a trace. Dragon Queen lowered her body and hid half of her body behind the steel shield. Bam, 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 the ice swords hit the shield one after another. The force was like holding up a shield to block a rocket, causing Dany's left arm muscles to tear apart. Okay, her left arm muscles were already torn apart. But Dany still let out a long sigh of relief. The ice swords of normal strange ghosts were very strong. They were bone-chilling and formed a layer of ice on the surface of the steel. But the ice swords didn't do any damage to the steel itself. To put it more directly, even if the long night fell, the power of the ice of normal strange ghosts was still lower than the power of the fire in the steel. Ka-ka-ka-bang, accompanied by the sound of ice crystals shattering. Dany's right hand felt lighter. Looking down, she saw that the tip of her white sword had already shattered. It was like a normal iron sword that had been shattered by a normal strange ghost's ice sword. The 3-foot-long blade was half an inch shorter. Without the white sword stuck in his eye socket restricting his movements, King Strange Ghost immediately howled. He slapped his hands on the ground and exerted strength in his waist. Like a carp, he flipped himself up. "You deserve to die." He roared at Dragon Queen. Behind King Strange Ghost, there were already hundreds of normal strange ghosts that had rushed over to rescue her on their dead horses and ice spiders. Dragon Queen was surrounded. "Ha ha ha, let's take a hot bath together." She wasn't afraid at all. She raised her head and laughed. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Even the howling north wind couldn't stop the sharp whistling coming from the sky. The winged dragon army's wildfire bombs had arrived. Boom boom boom. Green flames surged, and waves of air spread out in all directions with earth-shattering power. Entering the state of windsong, Dragon Queen could distinguish the trajectory of every kerosene bomb falling from the sky. She was like a flea jumping back and forth, drifting with the waves. She dodged the kerosene bombs and directly hit her head. She moved with the wind in the strong airflow that could tear apart steel. He was strong, but he was strong. The cool breeze caressed the grave. A tornado could destroy a tall building. A piece of paper that fell into the eye of the storm remained intact. Dragon Queen, in the waves of air, tried her best to become a small piece of paper in the tornado. Dragon Queen took King Strange Ghost down with her. Inside the city gate, Jaime stretched out his hand to block the violent waves of heat. He was shocked beyond words. Excluding Old Bar, Big Bear, and the other winged dragon knights who stayed outside the city. A total of 34 winged dragons carried out the bombing mission, dropping 20 tons of wildfire at once. 50 meters in front of the city gate, 100 meters to the east, the ground within 100 meters was covered in demonic green flames. The flames rose 3 meters into the air, and the waves of heat rolled. The onlookers on the city wall 50 meters away couldn't help but retreat. Even the excitement of their blood couldn't make them ignore the scorching heat on their skin. They are all too noble. Stannis traded his life for hers, and the Dragon Queen also threw bombs at me. The night was dangerous and humanity was in danger. Finally, there were heroes who stood up and sacrificed themselves to save the world. They are all legendary heroes like Yasuo and Ahai. They should all be recorded in the annals of history, and the spirit of heroes will be immortal. The red-nosed old doctor's eyes were wet. 2 streams of tears flowed down his cheeks as he looked at the ocean-like lake of fire. He was moved to tears by the heroic sacrifice of the legendary heroes. King Strange Ghost is dead, and the night is over. Is it over just like that? Stannis and Daenerys are both dead. Sansa felt a sense of loss. She couldn't feel happy about losing her 2 biggest competitors. They are all true kings, great heroes who sacrificed themselves for the people of the 7 kingdoms, Elaine said emotionally. What are you talking about? The plump and short Jichi widened her almond-shaped eyes and said disdainfully, You want to burn Khaleesi to death with this little fire? Haven't you heard of the name Immortal? Can she really not burn? She can't burn to death? The big sister of the sand snakes, Opaya, said doubtfully. That's wildfire. It's different from normal firewood. Elaine had vaguely heard of the legend of the Dragon Queen's immortal, but she didn't believe that the immortal was immune to wildfire. How many Targaryens in the past had been burned to death by wildfire? These people couldn't be blamed for being ignorant. In fact, this Dany was different from the original host who liked to wear a lot of titles. The original owner of the body often said the name of the immortal, but Dany wanted everyone to think that she could actually be burned to death. Wildfire is just Khaleesi's special bathwater. That's all, Jichi said with certainty. Boom! Everyone was about to say something when they heard an explosion from the sea of green fire in front of them. Then a black figure flew out of the green fire. It slid on the ground for 7 or 8 meters, its body covered in gray frost. Everyone was shocked and some of the warriors cried out in despair. Ah, the king of Foreign Ghost isn't dead. Even this can't burn it to death? The 7 hells. Stannis died together with it and pierced its heart with his red sword. Actually, he didn't. The onlookers couldn't see clearly and misunderstood. It didn't die. The Dragon Queen's tile steel sword is so wide. It pierced its head, misunderstood again. It stuck in its eye, and it still didn't die. It was stepped on, surrounded by warriors bathed in wildfire. How could it not die? Look, there's someone in the fire. Someone is coming out of the fire. Suddenly, a sharp-eyed knight saw a black figure slowly walking out of the green fire. It's the Dragon Queen. She really doesn't burn? Of course the queen doesn't burn. She's the immortal. But that's wildfire. The Dragon Queen had a shield in her left hand and a sword in her right. She was surrounded by green flames and looked like a flame demon. She walked out of the wildfire step by step and walked towards the King of Foreign Ghost, who was quickly getting up. When the King of Foreign Ghost stood up and raised his sword in a defensive position, everyone's vision blurred and they suddenly lost track of the Dragon Queen. She was too fast. She stepped on the wind and appeared in front of the King of Foreign Ghost in a few steps. It was such a big steel shield. It was about 1.2 meters on the ground, but in the Dragon Queen's hands, the shield seemed to have shrunk by 10 times. She skillfully avoided the King of Foreign Ghost's ice sword. She squatted down and attacked with the shield, smashing it into its stomach. Bang! A thunderous explosion sounded again. It was exactly the same as before. The King of Foreign Ghost was very clumsy during the whole process. It was like a dummy doing a shield attack in the arena. It was sent flying 7 or 8 meters without any resistance. Then bang! The 3rd time. Bang! The 4th time. Now all the knights understood. It wasn't that the King of Foreign Ghost was too weak. It was that the Dragon Queen's shield attack was too strong. 7 gods above, her swordsmanship has already surpassed Arthur Dayne's. Even her shield attack has reached perfection. Is she possessed by a warrior? Jamie looked at the king of foreign ghost who had landed in front of him. He felt like he was in a dream. Hold it down and chop it up. The Dragon Queen's voice came from afar. Chapter 8:19. Bam Bam Bam. After 5 consecutive shield attacks, Dragon Queen's extreme speed and great strength transformed into momentum on King Ghoul's body, knocking it all the way to the city gate and landing in front of the knights. Hold it down and chop it up. I don't believe we can't kill it. Dragon Queen gritted her teeth. She walked out of the wildfire. Her green velvet cloak had been burned, but her blue and white armor was still shiny as if it had not been burned by the green flames. Kill King Ghoul and the Long Night. Big Bear roared and rushed over first. He held down King Ghoul's right arm that was holding the sword and swung his steel sword with all his might. It was like chopping a wooden stake. Kill King Ghoul and the Long Night. Old Bart, Clinton, Chui Luo, Greybug, Jamie and the others rushed forward, holding down its legs, feet and arms, swinging their swords wildly. Shao King Ghoul opened its mouth that was missing front teeth and let out a soul-freezing howl. Ah! The knights surrounding it were bleeding from their 7 orifices, their faces twisted. You're already meat on the chopping block, still want to struggle. The dragon soul entered its body and used soul-suppressing strike. King Ghoul's soul attack was interrupted. The souls of the soldiers surrounding it seemed to have taken a hot bath, and their minds were clear again. Qidong! Dragon Queen also walked forward, stabbing her sword into its heart where the red sword had pierced through. The tip of the sword broke. The blade was too wide and the ice armor was too thick. Sir, stab it in the heart. Danny let old Bart do it. After a while, Your Majesty, King Ghoul's ice armor is too scary. It can't be broken. Barristan's right arm that was holding the sword was covered in a layer of white frost. When he spoke, his teeth were chattering. This was not an illusion. The ice power of the entire northern region was gathering towards King Ghoul. Although it was held to the ground by a few large men with oak shields, a thick layer of light blue ice armor quickly solidified on its body. It looked very similar to the fire armor that Sheep Egg had used fire magic to solidify in Orlos's magic tower. What was even more frightening was that the ice armor was like a black hole, stealing the energy and heat from the people around it. Or perhaps the king of foreign ghosts had turned into a white hole of ice, shooting out the power of ice from the Long Night in all directions. Every strand of frost energy was like a living creature, drilling into the bodies of living people and greedily devouring their warm life force. Because of Strange Ghost King, the area under the city gate had turned into an ice hell. There was even a layer of frost on the ground where it was lying, spreading in all directions. Damn it, my feet are frozen. The knights around King Strange Ghosts were terrified. Visible to the naked eye, the white frost crept up from the soles of the boots to the insteps, ankles, calves. Even the gray stone walls on the side were covered in a palm-thick layer of light gray ice that was rapidly spreading upwards. The crowd that was leaning on the battlements and looking down excitedly, cheering and cheering, felt as if they had touched a red-hot iron. They screamed and stepped back. But even if they wanted to retreat, their feet and hands were frozen to the wall by the frost. The heat of their lives was like a pool of water that had its gates opened, gushing out. Holy Mother! King Deviant Ghost wants to freeze Winterfell. The Long Night is really brought by the Deviant Ghosts. Sansa held her big belly. With the help of Theon and Jenny, she quickly leaned against the wildfire brazier to avoid the cold that was pressing down on her. Hiss-ga-boom! 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 The 3 megalosaurus lying on the city wall and the top of the tower moved. They roared into the sky and spewed out white, golden, and blood-red dragon flames from their mouths. The 3 dragon flames gathered in mid-air, and then spread out to a radius of 100 meters. It was like a huge umbrella that covered the top of Winterfell's city gate. The handle of the umbrella was in Dragon Queen's right hand. It was actually more like a huge mushroom umbrella. The fire-forbidden domain was still there. She could not control it as accurately as before, but she could still roughly knead the dragon flames into the shape of a mushroom. Under the cover of the dragon flames, the flame power and fire element were rampant. The sky, ground, city walls, and people's bodies were all dyed red by the hot flames. The power of ice struggled to fade away and retreated to the surface of King Deviant Ghost's body, condensing into a thick cold fog that did not dissipate around it. Everyone regained their vitality again. But the tactic of chopping up the stuffing was not very effective. Just like Great Wizard Valeglia, who was standing on the side of the magic tower, as long as it did not exceed the upper limit of the power of fire magic injected into the magic pump, no one could break the flame shield on his body. The Long Night, especially the northern region that was ravaged by the Long Night, was King Deviant Ghost's magic tower. The power of ice surged in from all directions, constantly strengthening the ice armor on its body. If there was no Megalosaurus, it could really turn the entire Winterfell into an ice sculpture. Bang crack, Mormont raised the steel sword that had a large gap in its front teeth and said in horror, "My steel sword is broken, how is this possible? Its arm is stronger than steel?" Clearly before Stannis. At this point, Big Bear seemed to think of something and suddenly shouted, "The red sword of the hero, only the light messenger can kill King Deviant Ghost." Jaime exhaled a thick white breath and asked, "Your Majesty Dany Alice, where is the light messenger? I seem to have heard you say that King Deviant Ghost cut it into pieces?" "The light messenger is indeed broken." "What? The prophesied light messenger to end the Long Night is broken? What do we do now? Without the red sword we can't kill King Deviant Ghost." A group of people who knew of Asha's prophecy were confused. Even those who were skeptical of Asha's prophecy, now that they had surrounded King Deviant Ghost for so long, they more or less understood Yasur and Yahai's difficulties in killing their wives as a sacrifice to the sword. Without the light messenger, they could not kill King Deviant Ghost even if they caught him. Hound stabbed an ironwood spear into King Deviant Ghost's mouth as he cursed loudly. Bullshit prophecy. Did the prophecy say that King Deviant Ghost would lie on the ground like a dead pig for us to stab? This was also the truth. The prophecy and the great battle that they expected should be like Erlu and King Deviant Ghost before, back and forth, and it would be extremely thrilling. He shouldn't have kicked King Ygue like a ball like the Dragon Queen was hitting her son. If Dragon Queen had the red sword, King Deviant Ghost would not be able to withstand a single blow. When they thought of this, their expressions became strange. The legendary and divine nature of Erlu and King Deviant Ghost's desperate fight seemed to have decreased a lot. Dany looked around at the soldiers who were shivering in the cold air around King Deviant Ghost, and comforted them loudly. The Deviant Ghost cavalry was completely wiped out in the wildfire, and King Deviant Ghost is now a turtle in a jar, with no reinforcements and no way to escape. There is nothing that cannot be killed, we have time, and we can slowly grind it to death. With that, she waved her right hand, and a thick pillar of fire dropped down from the center of the dragon flame mushroom above her head. The mushroom-like stem was aimed at King Deviant Ghost's lower abdomen. Like a water column shot out from a firefighter's water gun, the scorching dragon flame landed on King Deviant Ghost's lower abdomen, making a sizzling sound, and a large amount of steam rose. The soldiers who were holding King Deviant Ghost down could not help but tilt their heads. Dragon Queen waved the broken sword, not dodging the dragon flame and steam, and stabbed at King Deviant Ghost's lower abdomen that was shot by the dragon flame. King Deviant Ghost's lower abdomen was like a leather drum, making muffled sounds of tearing. The broken sword pierced the ice armor, leaving wounds on King Deviant Ghost's lower abdomen, but it could not penetrate deep into the internal organs, and was immediately blocked by new ice crystals. King Deviant Ghost grunted in pain, but there was no fatal injury. Dany was annoyed. She raised her iron boot and stomped down on King Deviant Ghost's crotch. Unexpectedly, this inadvertent act of venting her anger was extraordinarily effective. Crack, the ice armor on King Deviant Ghost's crotch shattered, and a heel imprint appeared. Ouch! King Deviant Ghost closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and resisted the hound's attack on his throat, and let out a miserable howl from his chest. Sir Richard's eyes lit up, and he laughed. "I see, this iceberg is Bunyan Stark, and he also has a weakness. Queen, please let me try. Everyone, do me a favor and pull King Deviant Ghost's legs apart." He raised his fake red sword and said solemnly. Dany was stunned for a moment, then understood his intention. She shuddered and made room for the demon hunter. Although Grey Worm and Missandei, who were in charge of pressing King Deviant Ghost's legs, didn't know what was going on, they endured the bone-piercing cold and pulled King Deviant Ghost's ankle. "Activate the Saint Seiya armor." Before Richard attacked, Dragon Queen kindly reminded him, "I almost forgot if you didn't mention it." Richard suddenly understood and took 2 steps back, his expression extremely sincere. The power of faith accumulated for 4 days can only maintain the Saint Seiya armor for a few breaths, but it won't take much time to complete a killing blow. What Saint Seiya armor? Jamie and the others were confused. You're not lying, did you really bring down a set of Saint Seiya armor from heaven? Clutton Sanj, one of the 3 heroes of hearts, was surprised. Saint Seiya, what kind of warrior is that? Armor brought down from the heavens? He's clearly wearing an old ancestral armor. The surrounding people were puzzled and looked at the warrior of hearts strangely. Almighty Dragon of Heaven. Richard chanted a spell, and a circle of golden 7-pointed stars lit up between his eyebrows. The warrior's divine power and the Holy Mother's holy healing poured into his body. Supreme Stranger. The deity's descent, rune imprinted on his soul, was activated, and the golden light came from the depths of his soul, from the inside out. 7 gods of Bo. The divine power of the warrior of the 7 gods ran in the deity's descent rune. Richard's muscles inflated, and his bones stretched and stretched with a crackling sound. Such an explosive change of body would certainly cause great damage to the body, but the Holy Mother's divine power immediately followed. Bo-roba makuba. The divine power seeped out of the armor through the flesh and solidified into a set of pale golden armor on the surface of Richard. A bull's head, a snake's god, a scorpion's tail, a tiger's claw, the fake golden Saint Seiya Lalo. Almighty Dragon of Heaven, Supreme Stranger, 7 gods of Bo-rua. Bo-roba maku. Richard's originally rough voice suddenly became grand and holy, like thunder in an empty valley, and the surrounding people were enlightened. They felt that the world in front of them was shaking in the thunder. 7 gods. Richard has become a giant. Gods, what power is this? It's so strong. Lord of Light, Richard has become. Sir Songji's expression was distorted. After the pockmarked night pierced the sun, the red-robed woman began to spread the doctrine and image of Shadow Demon Lalo among the Red Heart Knights. The others were shocked by the demon hunter's transformation, but the Dragon Queen was not very satisfied. Even without the service fee, Richard's divine power was still too little, and the time was too short. The outer holy robe was actually made of divine power, and with little divine power the color and texture were naturally a little illusory. It was not solid enough. However, the sun-piercing strike was enough. But if the king of deviant ghosts really died, how would history be written? The Dragon Queen's face was conflicted, and she began to worry unnecessarily. Demon die. Chapter 820. 7 gods. Please help me kill the ghosts. Richard grew from 1.9 meters to 2 meters. With the golden bull helmet on his head, he was close to 2.5 meters. He was like a mini giant. He also felt that he had the strength of a giant. His muscles bulged and he only had strength left. It was like drinking a year's worth of aphrodisiac. He felt extremely suffocated and bloated. At this moment, he was confident that he could break through any defense with his sword. The knight's iron armor, the shield-bearer's oak shield, the king of strange ghosts' ice armor. Almighty Dragon of Heaven, kill, kill, kill. He bent down and charged forward. The warrior's divine power activated the red sword in his hand, and a circle of golden red flames rose. Chihi rushed in. He advanced quickly, but halfway through he found it difficult to walk. He thought of the night when he was 13 years old and became a man on a maid. Almighty Dragon of Heaven, pineapple 8 meters red. The light golden armor on the surface of his body was drained of divine power, and it instantly dimmed and disappeared. But the attack was effective. Half of the 3-foot-long sword went in. Ouch! The king of strange ghosts trembled like a sieve. He closed his mouth and didn't dare to open it. He could only let out a soul-shaking wail from his chest. John, who was pressing the king of strange ghosts' head and using the Sisters of Darkness to poke its eyes and ears, heard his uncle's wail and looked at Richard, who was grinning and charging forward bravely. He couldn't bear to see it. Uncle Bunyan, open your eyes and remove the ice crystal armor. Let me free you. He begged in a low voice. Buzz, at this moment, the sky suddenly darkened. The battle between sunlight and darkness ended. The sun disappeared completely. The darkness was like a coffin, locking the last gap. Dani was doing two things at the same time. At this moment, in the space of faith of the seven gods, her divided soul swallowed the destiny of the Lady of Light. You dare to have designs on the Song of Light and start a battle of the laws. We will fight to the death. There is no room for negotiation. I will no longer care about long night and cold God. From now on, all my strength will be used to kill you, the King of Light announced coldly. He meant what he said. He retreated. Once again at the crucial moment, just as Richard twisted his blade and was about to lose control, the King of Light dropped the ball and ran away. Be careful, Frost God is descending from the astral plane. I can't stop him. Bran's shrill cry appeared in Dani and John's mind. He had been working with the Light King to resist the will of the Frost God. Mother God King Igwe called out in a low voice. It summoned a spirit of ice, darkness, and death. In an instant, all the braziers and torches in Winterfell were extinguished. The fake red sword was stuck in the middle of the pike, unable to move an inch. The pockmarked knight was so anxious that he roared again and again. In fact, in the fire-forbidden domain, ordinary flames could no longer be ignited. At this moment, even the wildfire had been extinguished. Winterfell seemed to have fallen into a dark and cold jelly. It was like an orange petal in an orange jelly. Will the torch be extinguished when it falls into the water? This was the same principle. Only the dragon flame was still burning fiercely. However, the mushroom umbrella, formed by the three Megalosaurus dragon flame, could no longer be maintained and scattered into a mess. Rumble, the ground was shaking and Winterfell was boiling. In all directions, millions of ghouls surrounded the city walls. The 20-ton wall of fire outside the city gate was extinguished and the ghouls swarmed in. The knights immediately raised their shields and formed a shield wall with King Igwe as the center. Winterfell had 6 city walls. There were no wildfire bombs to clear the area. The ghouls could pile up zombie ramps at any angle of the city walls. Only the dragon crystal weapons could cause damage. The real battle of Winterfell had begun. As Whitey leaped up and flew within the city walls to avoid the deviant ghosts that might appear among the ghouls. He extended his neck and twisted outwards. The dragon flame pillar swept the battlefield outside the city walls. Blackie landed on the tower above the city gate and stepped on a pile of rubble. The dragon flame landed directly on the shield wall more than 10 meters away. Dani raised one hand to the sky, and the dragon flames that were gushing towards her scattered in all directions like a pillar of water that had encountered a reef, splashing onto the ghouls outside the shield wall. Seeing that Winterfell was barely able to maintain the situation, Bran's warning came again. Be careful, the Frost God is changing the weather. The snowstorm in Winterfell and even in half of the northern region stopped temporarily. The cold air and snow all gathered above King Igwe's head and formed huge hailstones that fell from the sky. Only in the area near the city gate, the hailstones were as thick as a fist, as long as an arm, and as sharp as a spear. It was as if the Frost God in the sky was lying on the clouds and smashing the ground with his iron fists. It was the terrifying Pegasus meteor punch. Every hailstone was a punch. Blackie! Dani shouted. At the critical moment, Blackie opened his mouth and spat out a bright red fireball with a mosaic. Pop! The mosaic fireball flew above Dani's head and instantly expanded into a bright red mirror with a diameter of 30 meters. It happened to cover the shield formation formed by hundreds of knights below. And just 100 meters in front of him, another mirror that looked exactly the same as the first one opened in a seemingly slow but urgent manner. Whoosh 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 whoosh, the hailstones fell from the sky like spears and fell into the mirror at high speed. They didn't even cause a ripple and disappeared. Crackle bang bang bang. It was an indiscriminate attack. The knights in full armor looked around blankly in the pink mirror. The ghouls around them were smashed in the head by the hailstones and their corpses were smashed. Jaime looked up in shock and saw a dense army of ghouls. Above them, they were walking on the ground and were being smashed to pieces by the hailstones that passed by him. What is this? He asked in a daze. Dimension portal. This is the dimension portal opened by the Megalosaurus, Big Bear said excitedly. Don't delay, quick, carry King A into the city. Dani ordered loudly. Its back is stuck to the ice crystals on the ground. We can't lift it. Baristan and the others lifted its head, pulled its legs and grabbed its arms. After a lot of tossing and turning, they were shocked to find that King Igue's back was like a cement block, unable to move at all. Danny's eyes flashed and she said coldly, "Since it doesn't want to get up, let's bury it here." "Bury?" Jamie was shocked and then suddenly said, "Yes, we can use stones to pile it up. How can we have the time and opportunity to move the boulders now?" Baristan said helplessly, "If it weren't for the fear of freezing my dick, I would like to pee into its mouth. We can each pee and let it freeze in its feces and urine." The hound cursed. "That's a good idea. If we have time we can try it." Danny thought. "We can use the materials here," she said to John. "What do you mean?" John was surprised. Leave this tower." Big Black roared at the people in the tower below. The guards were at a loss and did not move. Squeak, squeak. Little White and Little Green changed their direction. The dragon flame was like a waterfall, burning the 3-story tower above the city gate from top to bottom. The dragon flame burning the tower woke everyone up. Although they did not know what was going on, they immediately fled the tower under the fire. Looking at the knights who looked over in surprise, Danny only said lightly, "Get ready to retreat." Before she finished speaking, the light red space door above their heads rippled a few times. Buzz rip. The space door that was wandering around 100 meters in front of them disappeared directly. The next moment, another space door suddenly appeared at the junction of the tower and the city wall under Big Black's feet. There were entrances and exits to the space door. In the higher dimension world, there was only one space door, and the entrances and exits were connected together. But in the 3-dimensional material world, there seemed to be 2 space doors, and the entrances and exits were separated. Now Big Black kept the entrance of the space door unchanged, and the exit position changed from outside the city to under the tower. Like a chainsaw cutting wood, the light red mirror laboriously cut open the boulder wall. It stopped halfway, and the remaining half of the wall was still connected. The tower did not fall into the space door. In fact, from the outside, the space door cut through stone as easily as a sword cutting through meat. But Danny knew that it was very difficult for the space door to cut through material objects. The difficulty here was mainly reflected in the consumption of the soul power. Big Black was completely using its power to drive the space door god's talent. Its own comprehension and skills were all gone. Last time in Orlos, its space door was blocked by the Black Tower's immortal stone. Poochie poochie. The stone tower shook, and there was an endless dull sound like firecrackers being set off inside. The hail did not stop, and it went through the space door and smashed into the stone tower. "I need 2 warriors to stay here and hold down King Strange Ghost's death acupuncture point," Danny said loudly. Looking at the dust and bricks falling from above, everyone could guess what was going to happen. Old John was the most courageous. He was the first to raise his hand and said with a serious expression, "Your Majesty, I'm willing to die with King Strange Ghost. Let me do it. After living for so long, it's not bad to go to heaven with the glory of ending King Strange Ghost's life." Baristan was eager to try. "I'm not afraid of death. Calixi, let me do it," Chui Luo said immediately. "My determination to protect the Westeros is not as good as a centaur's. Your Majesty, tell me, what should we do?" Hound said loudly. Then Jamie, Big Bear, Darkstar and the others all expressed their willingness to step on the path of glory. Even the little crab, when Danny glanced at him, reluctantly expressed his willingness to die for his queen. Well, his father and brother were both winged dragon knights, and they were not here. Of course, the little crab did not want to die, but everyone around him was patting their chests, eager to sacrifice themselves. If he did not do anything, he would be too conspicuous and unconventional. But he did not know the Dragon Queen's habits. If Sir Elisa was here, he would rather lose face than raise his hand to ask for a sacrifice. Because the Dragon Queen loved to drag her own people into the death squads. She called it, leading by example, absolutely fair. Sir Satiga, your ancestors and your descendants will be proud of you. The Dragon Queen sighed. Sir Richard, Mother of God bless you. The little crab's eyes widened, and his soul froze into ice. The queen's voice seemed to come from the sky. I've been chosen. Why, I'm Sadiga, your direct descendant. Also, I'm still dreaming of becoming the queen's husband. I'm not married, and I don't have any descendants. His mind went blank, and he did not even know what to say. Your Majesty, thank you for bestowing this honor upon me. I promise to complete the mission. The pockmarked knight was different. He was very happy and excited. Dragon Queen, His Majesty Stannis is dead. I'm willing to imitate his heroic act of perishing together with King Strange Ghost. Please give me this opportunity. The short and stout Sir Sanj said emotionally. Don't even think about snatching it from me. The pockmarked knight glared at his partner. Richard, we've known each other for many years. Just help me this once and leave the honor to me. Sir Sanj pleaded. No, I can give up everything else. But the honor of perishing together with King Strange Ghost must not be given up. Seeing the two arguing, the little crab was conflicted. Chapter 8:21. Time is of the essence. Stop arguing. I'm willing to give my honor to Sir Songgu. Riga Sitiga had a pained expression. Without waiting for Dragon Queen to speak, Sir Songgu stepped forward and took the little crab's hand. He said sincerely, "Thank you, Sir Sitiga. Thank you so much. When I go to heaven, I'll pray to the Holy Mother every day to bless you with health and longevity until the summer comes." Holy Mother, don't you believe in the Red God? The little crab looked at the red heart on his chest and asked in confusion. Believing in the Red God can also go to heaven. Defeating the deviants can also go to heaven. Songgu said matter-of-factly. The pockmarked knight looked at his little friend in shock. Seeing that he was serious and did not seem to have lost his mind, he asked curiously, "You scolded me for betraying my faith and refused to even bring the atonement scroll. Why did you change your mind now?" Sir Songgu looked at the sky and quickly said, "His Majesty Stannis and Mage Melisandre are both dead. The sun is also covered by darkness. I don't think the King of Light is reliable. The Holy Mother of the Seven Kingdoms is more realistic and powerful. You've been to the Seven God Heaven and revived in the Holy Robe. But who has been to the Red God Heaven? Who knows what the Red God Heaven is like? If you're really forged into chains, it'll be too tragic." This was too honest. Richard could not refute it. The little crab ran away in shame under the gaze of the Dragon Queen, but was stopped by the short knight. "Wait, Count Sitiga. I don't have an atonement scroll. Lend me your red light version. I still have to fight the corpses outside the city." The little crab was troubled. Richard turned to the Dragon Queen and asked, "Do you have an extra atonement scroll?" "I didn't bring it. But don't worry, I'll be right beside you. When you die, I'll immediately summon Stranger and send you to heaven," Dany promised. Actually, while they were chatting, the others were not just standing there and listening. After confirming that the members of the Suicide Squad were the little crab and Richard, Old Barton, Jamie and the others had already raised their shields and retreated into the city gate. Now there were only a dozen stainless steel warriors, Dany, the Red Heart Knight and the little crab holding the deviant Ghost King down. "You two hold on tight to it." Dany instructed the two Red Heart Knights to pin down the King of Strange Ghosts. Then she flashed and moved 10 meters away. The next moment, whoosh! The space door under Big Black's body suddenly expanded. The tower, which had only been cut in half, was now cut in half by the light red mirror. Boom! The chimney-shaped stone tower immediately sank into the pale red mirror, and fell from another mirror outside the city gate. "Holy Mother, please protect me," looking at the hollow stone tower falling from above. Songgu couldn't help but shout, "You must smash me to death." Well, of course the tower is not solid. The space door was cut along the city wall. The bottom of the stone tower that fell from the sky was actually the hall of the first floor of the tower. It was more than 20 square meters and more than 4 meters high. It was like a big bowl that covered the heads of the Red Heart Knight and the King of Strange Ghosts. If the stone tower was solid enough, the two of them and the ghost would be like Bai Suzhen under the Leifeng Tower. They would be trapped under the tower instead of being crushed into meat paste. After all, there was still a space of 4 meters above their heads. Fortunately, the space door was opened a little high. It was more than 20 meters in the air. The 100-ton stone tower did not have a steel frame. It fell to the ground, shook a few times, and collapsed. Boom! The ground shook a few times. Smoke and dust filled the air. There was an additional 7 to 8 meter tall pile of rocks at the city gate. The hailstones in the sky stopped. The entire Winterfell fell into silence after the explosion. It was quiet. Other than the whistling of the north wind, everyone stretched their necks and looked at the rocks below the city. Is the king of strange ghosts dead? Barristan asked expectantly. Definitely not dead. The ghouls outside the city did not fall. The torches on the city wall still can't be lit. Jon frowned. Not just the king of strange ghosts, even Sir Richard and Sir Songu are not dead, Dany said awkwardly. She kept her promise and had been waiting for their souls to send them to heaven. Now that their souls did not appear, it meant that they were not dead. Winterfell had a history of 8,000 years. The building materials were of high quality. Even the stone tower's floor was made of a whole piece of rock. It was very sturdy. A few long pieces of rock were placed horizontally to form an angular space, allowing the 2 Knights of Red Heart to survive. But as Knight Songu shouted, he would rather be smashed into meat paste. It was too torturous to slowly suffer in pain and bleeding. Is it really impossible to kill the king of strange ghosts without the hero's red sword? Big Bear frowned. It has a thick layer of ice armor on its body that cannot be broken. It is normal for it to be able to withstand the falling rocks. But the king of strange ghosts is trapped inside. We can kill all the ghouls first and then slowly torture it. Jaime said excitedly. Your Highness, we can use the space door to cut its body. Jon suggested softly. Dany pointed to the sky and said in a low voice, we can try, but we have to chase away the one in the sky first. Gods, what is that? Jon looked up and exclaimed. Rumble Kalala. The dark clouds above Winterfell rotated slowly, forming a giant whirlpool that rotated counterclockwise. Purplish-black lightning chains swam around the center of the whirlpool. At first, the area of the dark clouds was not large, barely covering 100 meters around the King's Gate. But like cotton candy, every time the dark cloud whirlpool rotated, the surrounding dark sky would rotate as well. Round after round, under everyone's stunned gaze, a black whirlpool with a radius of 10 kilometers covered the sky. A look in the distance, there is light. Suddenly, Jacqueline shouted from the city wall. Actually, without her reminder, everyone noticed that the dark sky that was originally the same color was divided into 2 circles. Every time the giant whirlpool rotated, the darkness became thicker, and the color of the sky outside the whirlpool became lighter. If the darkness was material velvet, the total number of velvet was fixed and evenly distributed in the sky of the northern region. Now, under the control of the gods, the velvet that represented the darkness began to accumulate in the sky above Winterfell. Winterfell was even darker, and the rest of the city revealed a gray sky. From afar, it was as if there was light outside the black whirlpool. In fact, there was no sunlight at all. The light came from the darkness. Lalo had already retreated. Even the shattered sun had exhausted its energy and disappeared completely. Be careful. This is a large-scale hailstorm mana spell. Everyone, hide in the tomb immediately. A flock of crows descended from the sky and cawed in unison above Winterfell. Bran was in a hurry and appeared in front of everyone without concealing himself. The Winterfell defenders were shocked and suspicious. Blackie immediately said, all soldiers, the generals of each section of the city wall are to lead their troops into the tomb. There was a bug-like structure in Winterfell, and that was the tomb that was tens of meters underground. All the official members of the King of the Northern Region and the House of Stark, not counting illegitimate children and married daughters, would be buried in the Winterfell tomb after they died. For example, Lyanna, Ide, Ricard, and Brandon were buried in the tomb. Every deceased person had a space the size of a parking space to place the sarcophagus, statues, and direwolves. Yes, in front of the sarcophagus, there was a statue of the deceased ascending to the top. At the foot of the statue was a roaring direwolf. Every time Robert went to Winterfell, the first thing he did was enter the tomb to see Lyanna's statue. For 8,000 years the Stark legacy had been passed down. How many people had died? However, they were all placed in the tomb. From this, one could see how big the tomb was. In fact, the huge cavern in the tomb was even bigger than the castle on the surface. Under Blackie's command, the soldiers in the city began to leave in an orderly manner. Danny asked telepathically, "How powerful is the large-scale frost god spell? The kind that can destroy cities and countries. It's less powerful than the Dornarm and the Neck Swamp, but it's definitely stronger than the time when Loina Water Wizard flooded Valeglia's city." Bran's mental waves were filled with fatigue and powerlessness. Fuck, this is a forbidden spell. Is hiding in the tomb useful? Danny's face was pale. She began to consider if she should escape on her dragon. "If it wasn't for you, everyone here would have died." A large crow cawed as it landed on the city gate. "What's the use of personal strength against such a natural disaster? You are the controller of the wind song. How can there be a wind god defeated by a storm?" Bran said in a low voice. His words were very reasonable. Danny could not refute him. However, she had to refute him even if she could not. "I don't know a single wind spell. I can only use the most primitive way to communicate with the wind. Or do you have any powerful wind spell in the Green Prophet's memory that you can teach me now? You have the wind of the world from the Mother Goddess. Find all the tornadoes and analyze their structure. Then you can create a spell to summon tornadoes yourself. Do you still need me to teach you? You can say this to me 500 years later. I have only had the wind of the world for half a month. However, how many things do I have to worry about in this half a month? We are not attacking each other but defending against their attacks. You don't need to use large-scale spells. You just need to destroy their ice storm. Try it first." Bran's voice became softer. Danny sighed. 2 fire crows flew out of her eyes and landed on her shoulders. They turned into a pair of fire wings in the shape of a round shield. She leaped into the air like a big bird, leaving behind a trail of fire in the pitch-black sky. Then she arrived at the giant black vortex. Wherever the wind god went, the wind in nature was her friend. She could merge with it and fly with it. Now she felt that the wind was out of her control. The wind was very cold. Chapter 822. Be careful, the white frost is coming, Bran said in fear. Danny looked up and saw that the giant whirlpool with a radius of 10 kilometers seemed to be slowly but rapidly extending downwards into a long pipe, like a funnel. No, it didn't look like a funnel. The tail of the whirlpool was too thin. It was like a fishing line hanging from a Boeing 747. If it wasn't white and emitting white light, which contrasted with the black whirlpool, Danny wouldn't have been able to find it even with Bran's reminder. The white trail in the center of the whirlpool was very fast. In a short while, it drifted down 5,000 meters and was only 2,000 meters away from Danny. "Run, that's the white frost," Bran said anxiously. "What's the white frost?" Danny moved with the wind. She didn't lower her altitude and flew horizontally away from Winterfell. "Do you remember why I asked you to rebuild the Great Wall?" Bran asked. That day, Danny discovered that there were still runes operating in the Great Wall. They even preserved part of her mana. However, she didn't intend to repair the 30-kilometer collapsed Great Wall. She felt that the Great Wall with a hole was useless. Bran appeared and told her, "Our world is a closed system. When the long night comes, the cold air from the north will enter our world. The Great Wall is the dam that blocks the cold air. A damaged Great Wall is better than no Great Wall. It's like how a dilapidated house is warmer than the outside. Every moment, there's cold air entering our world from the north. The Great Wall can't block all the cold air. It's less in summer and more in winter. The long night is the peak of the cold air invasion. The long night has arrived, and the northern region is shrouded in thick ice power. This power is getting stronger and gradually eroding the Westeros and even the entire world. Eventually, the world will be dragged into the abyss of ice and darkness. The ice power is like poison to us living beings, but the deviant ghosts absorb the ice power to grow stronger. We can't break the ice armor on the deviant ghost king because he can absorb the ice power from the heavens and earth to replenish himself. Now the frost god is extracting the ice power from the northern region and condensing it into an ice mana spell. It was by Shuang. Because of the frost god's spell, the ice power in the northern region has been greatly reduced. As you can see, the sky in the distance has brightened up, and the average temperature has risen. Using your dragon degrees, it's at least 20 dragon degrees higher. In other words, the white frost we're about to face is an ice monster that can lower the temperature of the entire northern region by 20 dragon degrees. Danny's voice trembled. How big was the northern region? At least 2 million square kilometers. Then, how much energy would it take to lower the temperature of the entire northern region by 20 degrees Celsius? You don't have to use up all the white frost. That's not realistic. It's like a flood. You can't drink it. We just need to make sure the white frost can't hit us, Bran said in a deep voice. That was true. White frost didn't chase me. He went to Winterfell. Can dragon flames deal with white frost? Dany turned her head to take a look before flying towards Winterfell. You can try, but you must be careful. Megalosaurus is not agile enough, and its huge body can easily be caught by the hoarfrost. Sansa regretted it. She shouldn't have brought her sister back to Winterfell because of the prophecy about the deviant ghost. The deviant ghost king's ice armor was so thick and sturdy that dozens of knights couldn't even break through it. What was the use of Arya holding the dragon bone dagger? Well, no one knew that the prophecy was true. Only the radiant messenger could kill the deviant ghost king. But she shouldn't have stayed in Winterfell. She had considered that as the main battlefield of the Great War, Winterfell would be fraught with danger. At the beginning, the battle was still within the realm of mortals' understanding. Stannis and the deviant ghost king were evenly matched, and they fought back and forth. It was completely in line with the settings of the legends. Then the Dragon Queen changed the story. She pretended to be weak to eat the tiger. At the beginning of the battle, she was in a stalemate with a normal deviant ghost. After a long battle, even the humans thought that was her true combat power, let alone the deviant ghost king. If the deviant ghost king knew the true level of her swordsmanship, he probably wouldn't have appeared alone. After all, Uncle Bunyan was a Stark. When he became the deviant ghost king, he seemed very simple and didn't know how to scheme. Oh, that's not right. When he fought with Stannis, he used many tricks and finally killed the radiant messenger, the only fatal blow to him. Unfortunately, when faced with the sudden power of the Dragon Queen, all his tricks were useless. Even though she didn't know much about swordsmanship, she knew that Uncle Bunyan was far inferior to Sword Daybreak, and the Dragon Queen had surpassed Arthur Dayne. The deviant ghost king was beaten up like a child by the Dragon Queen. Although it wasn't the fixed plot of the legends, it was still a human battle. But the hailstorm that followed, the fire in Winterfell went out, the dimension portal cut the tower. Even Grandma's legends weren't so exaggerated. But this wasn't the most exaggerated. The giant whirlpool was 10 kilometers wide. Even the ignorant humans would tremble inexplicably. The extraordinaries who sensed the terrifying mana within were already in despair. Sansa knew deeply that this was the prelude to a terrifying spell. As a moon singer, she could even predict the fate that would befall Winterfell through the violent tides in the Mana Sea. Even though the Dragon Queen suddenly grew a pair of wings and flew into the sky, causing the defenders in the city to shout excitedly, she didn't get much comfort from it. When Bran's crows loudly reminded the Winterfell defenders to hide in the tomb, she hesitated like the others. The others didn't know who was controlling the crows, nor did they understand the seriousness of the matter. But she knew that hiding in the tomb might not be useful. Escaping on the pterosaur was the best plan. But besides Jenny Poole and Theon, she also had Princess Elaine and the others with her. She had watched the deviant ghost king's final battle on the city wall, and had been surrounded by people. She couldn't escape on the dragon in front of them. While she hesitated, she was escorted back to the inner city by Jenny and Theon and queued up to enter the tomb. Perhaps the Dragon Queen could stop the forbidden spell in the sky? Perhaps the tomb could prevent them from being affected by the spell? After all, Bran let them enter the tomb but didn't remind her to escape on the dragon. And Jon and Arya, thinking of Jon and Arya, Sansa began to worry about her siblings. Just now, the Black Dragon's voice rumbled. Those who can't enter the tomb in 5 minutes, immediately turn back to the city wall and gate. Put down the wooden ladder and leave Winterfell. Sansa understood what he meant. The Winterfell tomb originally only had one entrance. After the deviant ghosts broke through the city wall, Jon knew that the Winterfell war was inevitable. He had no choice but to burn the remains of Stark's ancestor and empty the tomb to make it the last fortress against the ghost army. Only then did he carve out 3 more passageways. There were 4 rugged stairs that only allowed 2 people to walk side by side, but there were 20,000 people in Winterfell. It was very likely that when the forbidden spell in the sky descended, not all of them would be able to enter the tomb. Thinking of this, she became more anxious and hesitant. Sansa, don't worry. It will be our turn soon. We will be able to enter the tomb in 5 minutes. Theon supported her body and felt her trembling. He comforted her gently. Even if Miss Stark was willing to be behind the Princess of Dorne, the Earls and the Knights out of humility, she wouldn't be behind the commoners and barbarian soldiers. Maybe I should leave on the pterosaur. Theon was someone she could trust. Sansa whispered her thoughts to him. Not now. There are so many people watching. Princess Elaine just went in. Theon shook his head with a troubled expression. You shouldn't go to the city wall. If you are in the castle, you can do whatever you want. This was the reason why Sansa was hesitating. The tomb is 30 to 40 meters deep. The tornado can destroy the castle above the tomb, but it can't tear the ground apart, right? Ginny Poole said. She was once Sansa's personal maid. After Ide was killed, she worked as a prostitute for Littlefinger for a year. Later as Arya, she married Little Skinner. On the night of their wedding, Theon was forced to moisten her body. Now, after going through the vicissitudes of life, she returned to the side of Miss Winterfell, who was also no longer young. Both master and servant had become beautiful widows. The tornado disappeared before it formed. It seems that the north wind has also stopped. What is that? Theon's gentle comforting suddenly turned into a hoarse scream. Sansa felt a sudden chill behind her. She turned around and glanced at the city gate. That glance froze her soul. A white line hung down from the center of the giant dark whirlpool. It fluttered gently like a ribbon. It was about the thickness of a finger. It lightly brushed past the right tower of the outer city gate. It formed a pair with the stone tower that was cut by the dimension door. It was made of gray stone and was 3 stories tall. When the white ribbon brushed past the railing at the top of the tower, white powder that emitted a white light floated down. Perhaps the ribbon itself was made of powder. In the darkness, the fluorescent white powder was so gentle and beautiful that it was intoxicating. Ka 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 ka, gray-white ice crystals appeared out of thin air. Starting from the top of the tower where the white frost touched it, it sprinted downwards and spread in all directions. In a few breaths' time, the tower and the 50-meter-long city wall at the city gate were all covered in a layer of ice crystals. There was a long queue at the city gate. The commander cursed loudly and asked the soldiers who were dawdling to leave quickly. Even though the Black Dragon had warned them, those who could not enter the tomb in time were unwilling to leave the city. Leave the city to hide? Hide from deviant ghosts? There are deviant ghosts, zombies and even deviant ghost kings outside the city. Leaving the city is courting death? The soldiers complained loudly. Ka-ka-ka, what's that sound? The soldiers raised their heads. Their expressions froze and their movements froze. The white frost crawled on the walls of the city gate. The moment they felt the cold air from the white frost, they were frozen into ice sculptures. Bam bam bam. Because many people were still walking forward, their feet froze when they took a step forward. Their bodies naturally fell forward, shattering a handful of icy blue dust. Ka-ka-ka, the ice powder spread and blocked the view of the city gate. Only the cold sound of the white frost crawling could be heard. No. The people who were queuing up to leave the city saw the terrifying scene in front of them and shouted. However, their terrified cries seemed to have attracted a certain existence. Or rather, the white ribbon floating in the air was an intelligent creature. It smelled the fear of the humans and came. Ka-ka-ka, the white ribbon floated lightly as if it was weightless. It bounced off the heads of the people who were running frantically. It was like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. It left behind a circle of ripples. Wherever the ripples passed, the white frost spread out like ink falling into clear water. The entire world fell silent. No, Sansa's delicate features twisted into a demon's. She was so terrified that she peed her pants. Chapter 823. Save me. Merciful Virgin Mary. Dragon Queen, save me. Where is Dragon Queen? Megalosaurus, save me. Great Guardian of Light, save me. In the areas of Winterfell that had not been dyed white, the soldiers, servants, and civilians could no longer maintain order. They either cried and squeezed forward, found a room to hide in, or jumped off the city wall before the white frost reached them. More people ran while shouting the names of the Virgin Mary, Dragon Queen, King of the Northern Territory, and even Stannis the Undead. Kaboom slash, Dragon Queen and the others did not respond, but the giant whirlpool in the sky seemed to respond to their calls. Thick lightning rolled in the black clouds, as if the gods were waving their lightning whips to fight with the enemies. In the center of the whirlpool, bursts of crimson light pierced through the thick darkness. The falling white frost ribbons lost their previous lightness and elegance, like the leather whip of a butcher who had lost control of his emotions. They no longer chased after crowded areas, but whipped the castle, the stables, the spacious training ground, and even landed on the ghouls who were fighting with the soldiers outside the city wall. The ghouls were already cold enough, and because of their arrival, the weather was even colder. But in the face of the white frost, they were frozen like humans, falling to the ground and shattering into ice shards. 7 gods, what is that? Old Bart quickly escaped from the spreading white frost on the ground while looking back at the thousands of ghouls frozen in ice. The White Knights had been strictly following Dragon Queen's orders. The others were still hesitating whether to go out of the city to fight the ghouls, but they did not hesitate at all. The group of knights who were waiting at the city gate, those who had horses immediately found them, those who did not raise their shields and followed behind the knights. They formed an arrow formation and rushed out together. Along the King's Road, they ran away from Winterfell to the south. Old Bart, Big Bear, and the other followers of Dragon Queen rode their dragons. Naturally, they did not have war horses, so they could only run on their 2 legs. Just now, the white frost ribbons twisted like the wind and moved a kilometer or 2 horizontally, landing on the left side of Old Bart and immediately freezing the ground. If it weren't for the old knight's good luck that he was a little far from where the white frost fell, and that he was wearing a steel armor that could resist part of the power of the ice, he would have been glorious. The white ribbons that tracked the aura of the living in an orderly manner turned into a white frost whip that went out of control. It was an unexpected disaster for the people outside the city, but the Winterfell creatures who were queuing up to enter the tomb realized that it was a good opportunity to escape. After Bai Shuang left, they had time to enter the tomb again. Quick, get out of the way. This is Queen Sansa. This is Sansa Stark. She's pregnant. Theon carried the stunned Sansa in his arms and roared as he pushed his way forward. We should have left on the pterosaur. Danny Liz has already escaped. It's too late now. I've sent Lady away. It's too late. Sansa sobbed in Theon's arms. There's still time. We can hide in the tomb. That white frost whip can't freeze the ground into ice. There's a hot spring under Winterfell. Theon consoled her. Fortunately, the title of queen was useless. Stark was a sturdy signboard in the Northern Territory and Winterfell. Even though the white frost whip was wreaking havoc in Winterfell and their lives were in danger, many savages, Northern Territory civilians, and even noble knights made way for Theon. Boom! Just as Theon carried Sansa down the stairs, a dull sound came from the center of the black whirlpool in the sky. It caused the castle to tremble slightly. Then, red light tore through the black whirlpool and dyed the ground red. The world of darkness suddenly became like the birth of the sun, with thousands of rays of multicolored light. Everyone who looked up at the sky could feel the warmth of the red light on their cheeks. It was hot. What happened? Theon stopped in his tracks and looked at the sky in a daze. Hong 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 rumble, there was a hole in the sky. The red light dimmed and disappeared. It was replaced by white light. Everyone who looked up at the sky could feel the warmth of the white light on their cheeks. It was cold. The bone-piercing coldness made everyone fearful. The viscous white light that leaked down from the hole in the sky had the same color and temperature as the white frost whip. But the amount of white light, it was like a black iron pot covering the ground. At this moment there was a hole at the bottom of the pot, and the white porridge in the pot flowed out of the hole. It was like a child playing outside the house in winter. The snot that flowed out of the nose was long and cold. It flowed down the mouth and chin. Then with a slurp sound, the snot was sucked back into the nostrils. It was very cool. It was a pity that the black whirlpool only left the white snot and didn't suck it in. Now, the snot was falling towards Winterfell. Quick, let's enter the tomb. Sansa gripped Theon's cloak tightly and screamed with a distorted face. Walala, before his snot could fall, the hailstones arrived first. Winterfell was once again filled with wails. White frost flowed down from the sky like snot. Surrounding the frost was a thick icy fog. It was the moisture in the air that was frozen into tiny ice particles. The tiny ice crystals held hands and froze into large ice cubes. Hail was born. Fortunately, the hail wasn't interfered with by the gods. Otherwise, the hail wouldn't be the size of eggs or fists. Finally, the snot reached Winterfell. In an instant, white light flashed above Winterfell. The castle, the training ground, the city walls, and the people on the ground were all frozen. Ka-ka-ka. The snot froze into an icicle. The snot continued to flow, and the icicle expanded and rose. The water vapor in the northern region was sucked in, forming a cyclone around the icicle. The cyclone was like the hands of the gods that rubbed the sky above Winterfell. It created a 1 kilometer wide and 2 kilometer tall iceberg. Within the iceberg, one could see a lifelike castle with city walls, tall towers, courtyards, people and forests. It was like a magnified Disney's Crystal Ball castle. 7 gods above were only fighting the deviant ghosts. Why is there such a powerful force? On King's Lane, Jaime was on the verge of breaking down. Plop! Jon's legs turned to jelly, and he knelt on the ground. He wailed heartbreakingly, "No, Sansa, my sister. Caw-caw-caw." A flock of black crows flew down from the sky. One of them landed on Jon's shoulder, while the rest circled above the humans and ghouls. This team was being chased by thousands of ghouls, and the battle never stopped. Jon, pull yourself together. Sansa is hiding in the tomb. There's a hot spring in the tomb. Arya isn't in Winterfell. They're not dead. After hearing that his 2 sisters were fine, Jon felt much better. He tilted his head to look at the big crow on his shoulder and said sadly, "What happened?" "Winterfell is frozen. Sigh, this is the best ending. White Frost's ice power was released into the air. It's like the Frost God's forbidden spell missed. Dragon Queen neutralized the Frost God's attack." Bran sighed. "Best ending? We were about to win, but we were all wiped out. What kind of ending is that?" The Hound cut down a ghoul and roared without turning his head. "Didn't you see the strange phenomenon in the sky? That's a true god casting a large-scale forbidden spell. If it wasn't interrupted, there wouldn't be anyone alive within a 10-kilometer radius. Now you're all alive." "True god? Fuck, what's that? Where's our god King Lalo?" the Hound asked blankly. "It should be the Frost God. In the Asha prophecy, the deviant Ghost King was the servant of the Frost God. The god that Carhold City sacrificed was also the Frost God." Although James was paying attention to their conversation, his own line of defense was not messed up. He tied a round shield on his right hand to protect his waist. The sword in his left hand was as fast as lightning. The widow's wail pierced the ghoul's eye socket. He then pulled the sword horizontally, cutting off half of the ghoul's head and another ghoul's neck. That's right. The dark vortex in the sky is the Frost God's spell. Lalo is no match for him and has retreated. The Light King ran away? What about the 7 gods? Why didn't the warrior and the Holy Mother come? Jaime asked. 7 gods. The big crow had a strange look in his eyes. The 7 gods are here. It's the 7 gods and Dany Rise who stopped the Frost God's forbidden spell. There was nothing wrong with that. Dany didn't run away. She was usually afraid of death, but in the face of danger, she had a brute courage that she didn't know she had. In fact, she had been trying to stop the white frost from falling from the sky. For the first time, she hovered in the path of the white frost ribbons. 3 megalosaurus surrounded her and formed 3 huge dragon fireballs. The megalosaurus left. She held the fireballs and waited for the white frost ribbons as thick as a thumb to reach her body. The 3 dragon fireballs the size of carriages, one of which was the blacksmith fireball with the strongest flame power, smashed over together. There wasn't even a splash. There was no explosion, no expansion. No sizzling sound of red-hot soldering iron entering water. The white frost was like a greedy demon, reaching its tentacles into the dragon fireballs and sucking watermelon juice. In a few breaths, the fireballs shriveled, shrunk, and finally disappeared. In fact, the white frost didn't absorb the flame power in the dragon fireballs. Instead, it extinguished the dragon flames with a large amount of ice power. It was like using a fire hose to extinguish a lit candle. The second try was the space gate. Blackie was far away. A mosaic fireball shot out dozens of meters and cut off the white frost ribbons. Then the bright red space gate solidified into a seemingly solid ice crystal mirror and shattered with a crack. As expected, the space gate doesn't work well on Frost God, and even the King of Strange Ghosts. Bran sighed helplessly. The time and space talent that Mother Goddess gave you can be divided into time and space talents. Time is Door God's talent, while space comes from wind mastery, PS. To put it bluntly, the space gate was just a kind of witchcraft derived from the Song of Wind. Door God knew how to use it, and so did Frost God. However, the Song of Wind completely belonged to Door God. The Weirwood Root retained the Song of Darkness and could no longer use the Wind Space Gate. After 2 failed attempts, Dany gritted her teeth and thought, since I can't block the frost, I'll deal with the source of the frost. She rode on Blackie and opened the space gate. In an instant they crossed 8 kilometers, which was 8,000 meters in the sky. She and Blackie came to the top of the dark vortex. Only she and Blackie were left. Little White and Little Green flew to the White Blade River Mountains far away from Winterfell. Above the dark vortex, Dany looked up and saw the stars and moon that she hadn't seen for many days. They were still shining, but they were more than 10 times dimmer. She wasn't in the mood to lament the lack of stars. Below her, in the huge vortex of ice and darkness, a malicious and terrifying will was staring at her. It was Frost God. Dany versus Frost God, the first round. Chapter 8:24. There was an evil and cold consciousness in the black vortex that locked onto Dany. Dany immediately sensed something strange from him. She was no longer ignorant of the power of this world when she had just transmigrated. She had fought with Sheep Egg, Door God, and Lalo. She had even beaten Frost God's servant, King Strange Ghost, to death. It was not easy to judge purely based on strength, because Sheep Egg and Ar-Hro were not facing her with their true bodies and full strength. But at first glance, Dany noticed the difference between the God of Frost and the other gods. He did not fit in with this world and was incompatible. Or rather, Frost God was rejected by this world. Perhaps other people or gods would overlook this. But Frost God's distance from the world and Dany's closeness to the world were a stark contrast. Entering the state of Song of Wind, she was almost one with the world. The origin of the world was like a teacher who taught her the secrets of the law through the wind. Without any external help, Dany was confident that she could sing both wind and fire songs if she was given 1,000 years of cultivation. Compared to her, Frost God was like the secret son of the world's Will's wife and the old man next door. Previously, Dany had always thought that the one controlling the black vortex was just a clone of Frost God. Because if his true body was here, there was no reason for him not to attack personally, just like what the cow-headed snake demon did in the East Sea Kingdom. Now she was sure that Frost God's true body was here. He was in the black vortex below. But the world did not like him and bound him with a layer of law. If he really showed himself in front of others and fought with Dany and Megalosaurus, would he not be their match? Dany was not sure. But it was obvious that compared to physical combat, forbidden spells were more powerful and had better effects. Reality proved that even the powerful King Strange Ghost's performance in physical combat was very awkward. At this moment, seeing that Frost God was hiding in the black vortex, Dany would not foolishly rush in to seek a one-on-one swordsmanship challenge. Her goal was not to defeat Frost God, but to interrupt the casting process of the forbidden spell White Frost. The Megalosaurus flew along the surface of the black vortex at high speed, spitting out divine dragon flames. She was like a nimble fly, constantly harassing a certain lousy hand, who was sitting in front of the computer typing. As it turned out, even the Frost God was not that skilled. The purplish-red lightning and black shadow tentacles had tried to catch Dahe several times, but failed. However, flies could not cause much harm to people who were riding. From time to time, Blackie would sweep across the surface of the dark whirlpool and leave behind streaks of dragon flames. Besides producing white steam and black smoke, Blackie couldn't stop the white frost from corroding Winterfell. Yes, the dragon flame vortex still had some effect on Bai Shuang. Dany had indirectly saved Sansa's life. Due to the dragon flames, the power of ice and power of darkness in the whirlpool were unbalanced. The frost above Winterfell was like a whip that randomly whipped Winterfell. Before that, the ribbon-like white frost was like a devil's tentacles that accurately tracked the aura of living people. It went all the way to the dungeon gate and almost froze all the people who were queuing at the entrance of the tomb. I also have a forbidden spell. Cooperate with me and let's try it. In the end, Dany decided to use her killing move. Her divine power and soul power were infused into the bodies of the 10 fire elves. They turned into 10 crows and blended into the three-eyed crow's army of 3,000 crows. When the three-eyed crow and the frost god's wills clashed, the 10 crows left the flock and dove into the center of the black vortex. Explosions aren't necessarily art, but they are definitely the simplest and most violent. Boom! In the center of the black vortex, amidst the boundless power of ice, the 10 crows suddenly turned into 10 fire elves. For Dany, for all humans, charge! Little Fog shouted loudly and led the 9 fire elves to expand rapidly. Then boom! This was the reason why the world was filled with dazzling lights. The explosion was not only caused by the mana of the 10 fire elves, but also Dragon Queen's divine power and soul power. Simply put, the 10 fire elves and Dany self-destructed at the same time. It was a complete self-destruction. The effect was it was a little awkward. The self-destruction blasted a hole in the black vortex, and the accumulated power of ice poured out. It was unknown whether the frost god was severely injured, but Winterfell was sealed in ice by a 2,000-meter-tall icicle, killing 1,000 enemies and sacrificing 1,200 of their own. However, Bran felt that it was worth it. No matter how great the damage was to Winterfell, it couldn't change the fact that without the help of a true god, the humans were able to resist the frost god with their own power. This was the first time in history. It's elemental annihilation. How did you do it? Bran was astonished. It's the special characteristic of the fire elves. They are originally fire elemental creatures. Lalo can no longer force the humans to consider the big picture. You have broken free from your original destiny. We can ditch him and fight alone, Bran said with a complicated tone. This is just the beginning. Since the elemental explosion is proven to be effective, let's go big. Dany was in a very bad state. Her face was pale and her soul was in pain. She had no strength or mana, but her tired eyes shone with excitement. When she blew up Lady Chu in the Death World, she only paid the price of one thought. This time, all her divine power was drained, and her soul participated in the self-destruction. She was basically in the same state as the elves. Her vitality was greatly damaged, and she was on the verge of hibernation. However, she still had one last trump card, overclocking fusion. Previously, she had only overclocked with Blackie. Now, the 5 Megalosaurus had mastered the 9-colored vortex meditation foundation. She could fuse with the 5 Megalosaurus at the same time. However, Little Red and Little Gold were too far away, and the aftereffects of overclocking were too severe. She couldn't immediately rush over to treat them. Blackie was carrying her high in the sky, and he had to protect her, Little White and Little Green. Double overclocking should be enough. 3 kilometers south of Winterfell on the King's Road, more than 500 warriors formed a circle of shields, and they were surrounded by thousands of ghouls. Bunyan, you crippled man, come out and fight me. Jaime, the disabled man, loudly invited him to battle. Jon looked embarrassed. Uncle Bunyan, I'm now the Lord of Winterfell, and you're also from Winterfell. You used to be the person I respected the most and I was deeply loved by you. Now that Winterfell has been destroyed, I'm destined to die on the battlefield. Please fulfill my last wish. Come out and fight me fairly. Let me sever the last of our friendship before I die. The big crow leaped up from Jon's shoulder, and its sole voice entered the ears of all the living people. Found it. The whole army has it. The shield bearers on the periphery squatted down, and the wounded in the inner circle crawled on the ground. Gawk. Without waiting for Jamie and the others to respond, the big crow leaped up and led a flock of crows to an inconspicuous corner of the ghoul army. In the snow 200 meters away from the living shield formation, in the middle of a group of ghouls stood a white ghoul with an umbrella sword on its back and a horned crown on its head. King Strange Ghost. In the chaos, it was fished out from a pile of rocks by the ghoul giant. Previously, it had been hiding in the ghoul army, and even the three-eyed crow couldn't find it. Therefore, when Jamie provoked it, John moved it emotionally, and when it showed strong emotional fluctuations, it was immediately noticed by Bran. Then, Bran led a flock of crows over. Bran Stark. Seeing the flock of crows flying over, King Strange Ghost felt an inexplicable sense of danger. Red Sword wasn't the only one who could kill King Strange Ghost. In the world, only Red Sword's mana level had reached the highest true god level, and it could easily break through King Strange Ghost's defense. Without another word, King Strange Ghost retreated in a flash. It wasn't slow, but the way it ran was very awkward. It bent its body, stuck its butt out, and limped like a patient with severe hemorrhoids. Perhaps King Strange Ghost himself realized that his running posture wasn't graceful or domineering enough, so he hurriedly called for his horse. Soon, the ghoul horse with frost on its surface ran over. But before King Strange Ghost could climb onto the horse, the 8 crows had already surrounded it. Before King Strange Ghost could draw his sword and slash. Bam, bam, bam. The 8 crows turned into 8 little suns with human faces. They held hands and surrounded King Strange Ghost in the center, and shouted in unison, "Greetings to you on behalf of the Dragon Queen, long live explosion." At the same time, above the dark vortex, the remaining 40 crows and Meng Zotzi all fell into the center of the vortex and turned into 40 fire spirits. The 40 fire spirits squeezed together and shouted in unison, "Greetings to you on behalf of the Dragon Queen, long live explosion." There were 40 fire spirits in the sky and 8 on the ground. The 48 fire spirits divided all of Little White's and Little Green souls and magic power, especially the magic power. The Megalosaurus magic power was almost endless, but at this moment, they all self-destructed. Boom! The explosion wasn't loud, but the entire sky seemed to be ignited by flames. The dark vortex was like a cow dung that had been hit by a cannon, and a 1-kilometer-wide hole instantly exploded. Then the entire dark vortex was like a deflated balloon, spewing out large amounts of white powder and dark smoke. Before the powder and black smoke fell, they immediately turned into a surging storm and egg-sized hail. However, the water vapor in the sky of the northern region was almost dry, and the hail seemed abnormally thin. Visible to the naked eye, the dark vortex disappeared, the black clouds in the sky dispersed, and the sky gradually began to brighten. It was like coming from a dark night to a gloomy evening. The sky was clean and gray. As the sky brightened, the warriors who got up from the ground could see their surroundings clearly. 200 meters ahead, there was a hole the size of a basketball court. At the edge of the snow hole, there were corpses that fell like wheat. Most of them were still alive and were still struggling to get up. Even around the shield formation, there were corpses that were getting up from the ground. They were almost uninjured, but they couldn't stand steadily under the shock wave and fell to the ground. The vortex disappeared. The black clouds in the sky also disappeared. Is the god of frost dead? Is the king of strange ghosts dead? Is the long night over? Jamie shook his head that was constantly ringing, and looked around blankly. They're not dead, the corpses are still moving. John snapped his fingers, and a cluster of flames rose from the tip of his finger. Just as his face showed joy, he suddenly thought of something and his expression became anxious. He looked into the distance and said quickly, "The flame domain is broken, and the firewood can be lit. The king of strange ghosts must be in a bad state. We should take this opportunity to end it. The corpses aren't attacking us, they're retreating. The king of strange ghosts is really in big trouble." Barristan was both happy and anxious. "Where is the three-eyed crow? Help us lock onto the king of strange ghosts." The 500 warriors had been fighting for a night, and they were already exhausted, but now they seemed to be on drugs. They formed the arrow formation again and rushed to the center of the explosion. As soon as they got close to the edge of the snow hole, they were stunned. Someone had beaten them to it. Chapter 825. 40 Fire Elves, carrying 2 Megalosaurus mana and soul power, self-destructed. The power was terrifying. Before the explosion, Dani had been looking forward to it. But she wasn't naive enough to think that a fire element annihilation could kill a true god. The theme of the Winterfell battle hadn't changed. Kill the King of Strange Ghosts. Yes, the King of Strange Ghosts was the target. If the Frost God was chased away, it would be a success. But after the Black Vortex disappeared and the Frost God left, the King of Strange Ghosts wouldn't insist on fighting Winterfell. It would also run away. Even the three-eyed crow wouldn't be able to find it if it hid among the millions of ghouls. So before Dani attacked the Black Vortex, she had to find the King of Strange Ghosts and detonate the 48 Fire Elves. It would be best if she could kill it in one go. Even if she couldn't, with the Sun Vessel, the tower pressure, and the explosion of the Fire Elves, it would be at least half dead. Even if she couldn't kill it, she had to capture it alive. In short, everyone had suffered heavy losses in the Battle of Winterfell. She couldn't let the culprit escape. Arya discovered something terrifying. When she activated the Death God's Bible, the ghouls ignored her. The ghouls treated her as one of them. Bran was right, the Death God's Bible had a huge flaw. But she wasn't worried. First, under the Death God's mindset, there were no negative emotions like worry or fear. Second, the Dragon Queen promised to help her solve the problem of becoming a ghoul. She didn't trust the Dragon Queen, but she trusted Bran. Bran said that the Dragon Queen would definitely help her solve the side effects of the meditation technique. Finally, if the ghouls treated her as one of them, wouldn't it be easier to assassinate the King of Strange Ghosts? Yes, Arya also had the ambition to assassinate the king. Fighting for the Iron Throne for her sister Sansa was only a small part of the reason. She wanted to help Winterfell solve its crisis. Then, assassinating the King of Strange Ghosts would make her a legend. Who didn't want to become the hero in Old Nan's legend? She hid in the darkness and pretended to be a ghoul. Stannis' eternal life had touched her deeply. Of course, she was also tempted to attack him. Later, she saw a terrifying thing. The Dragon Queen actually took the initiative to break the hero's red sword. Why? Arya's heart was filled with questions. For a moment, she even suspected that the chairman of the United Front of Ghosts had defected to the Deviant Ghosts. However, when he thought about the Dragon Queen's identity as the Pope of the Seven Gods, the Seven Gods would definitely not be deceived by their believers, and they would definitely not side with the Frost God. Soon she stopped thinking about this problem. The conversation between the Dragon Queen and King Ygwe revealed a shocking secret. Her aunt wasn't kidnapped by Liga at all. That adulterous couple eloped. What did this mean? The legitimacy of the War of the Usurpers was gone. The deviant Ghost King who wanted to destroy the Westeros was a Stark, which was enough to make Stark feel vexed. If Stark was labeled as the main culprit of the War of the Usurpers, how would Winterfell and Stark be able to maintain their standing in front of the Seven Kingdoms? What would everyone think? Would there be a great reckoning? Arya was shocked again while she was lost in her thoughts. Dragon Queen pretended to be a pig to eat the tiger. She suddenly exploded and captured King Ygwe. Well, compared to the unforeseen events that happened one after another, this small matter was nothing. Finally, opportunities were given to those who were prepared. After a shocking explosion, Arya met King Ygwe, who was lying on the ground like a corpse. Actually, this wasn't just dumb luck. She saw King Ygwe being rescued from the rubble by the corpse ghost giant with her own eyes. She also saw him grit his teeth and howl as he pulled out the long sword behind his butt. King Ygwe didn't dare to destroy the fake red sword because after the blade was frozen by the power of ice, the shards would remain where they were, making it even harder to pull them out. It was also from that moment on that Arya decided not to treat him like Uncle Bunyan. It was too unsightly, too unsightly. Her wise and powerful second uncle of the Night Guard shouldn't be like that. Even King Ygwe's image as the world-destroying Demon King gradually collapsed in her heart. Seeing King Ygwe limping forward and the icy blue liquid flowing down the ice crystal leg armor, Arya started to look down on him. Other than the corpse ghost giant, there were a dozen other deviant ghosts protecting King Ygwe. Therefore, Arya didn't have a chance to sneak attack. But the opportunity came quickly. King Ygwe hid his aura and put on a gray cloak, pretending to be an ordinary corpse ghost and hiding in the middle of a group of corpse ghosts. If she hadn't seen the whole thing with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed that King Igue could be so wretched. That's right, she didn't think it was smart, only wretched. You're King Igue, the demon king that destroyed the world, the final boss in all of Grandma's legends. Can't you be a little tougher? But King Igue didn't have any deviant ghosts protecting him, so it was a good chance. Just as Arya was about to sneak up on it, something happened again. A huge explosion sent her flying 7 to 8 meters away. Her head was stuck in the snow. She staggered up and found that her chance was even better. King Igue got up from the snow pit at the center of the explosion and struggled to the edge of the snow pit. All of his ice armor was broken, his pale skin festering, and icy blue blood flowed down his legs to the ground, leaving light blue footprints. Right now, he was like a suckling pig that had been roasted alive, skinned, and minced. However, Arya also noticed that as wisps of grayish-white mist surged in from all directions, those terrifying wounds were rapidly healing. I can't waste any more time. Arya crept up behind King Strange Ghost without making a sound. She had almost no body temperature, no breath. She didn't seem to be any different from the corpse ghosts around her. Cut off its head? Pierce through its back? After hesitating for a moment, Arya decided to sneak attack King Igue's back because she only had a steel dagger in her hand. Unlike swords, daggers couldn't cut off heads easily. The dagger didn't make a sound, but Arya missed. After missing, she lost her balance and the dagger whistled in the air. King Igue stepped on his right foot and turned 180 degrees to avoid the attack. His ferocious and cold face faced Arya. His right hand shot out like lightning and grabbed her neck, lifting her 1/2 meter high like a rag doll. But its speed was greatly reduced. Hiss kaboom! The megalosaurus chased after it and bit the blue light. It spat out divine dragon flames and activated the bestowment spirit. Ah, Mother Goddess! The blue light quickly melted in the dragon flames and turned into spirit and divinity that entered the space of the 7 gods' faith. Then Dany saw a pair of cold dark eyes. Her, Blackie, and the 3-eyed crow's soul vision were all occupied by the huge eyeball. Their souls began to form a layer of white frost, and all their thinking and ability to move disappeared. Whoosh! The blue light that wrapped around King Igue's soul disappeared instantly. Chapter 826. I'm really envious of people who have backers. Dany sighed helplessly. The cold god's will was powerful, and it instantly pulled her and the 3-eyed crow into the dark ice-cold abyss of death. But their mental power wasn't weak, and they were only attacked by a surprise attack. But it was a pity that this was enough time for the King of Strange Ghost's soul to run around the world 100 times. It escaped. You should have been aware of this from the very beginning. You could have fulfilled Lalo's request, and he would have restrained the cold god according to fate, while humans could have focused on the King of Strange Ghosts. Now you've made a choice and changed your fate. The true gods are watching from the side, and it's inevitable that we'll run into the cold god. Today is just the beginning, and you must get used to dealing with the cold god, Lalo, and other dark demon gods. You don't have a way out and you don't have a backer to rely on. Because you're the strongest human, you're the backer of others, the 3-eyed crow said in a solemn tone. I didn't expect you to have such a high awareness, Dany said in surprise. The 3-eyed crow has always been the backer of the Westeros, and we've been carrying heavy responsibilities and walking alone in the history of the human kingdoms. We're already used to it, Bran said calmly. Heh, I'm just saying that you're fat. And you're really panting? Without all of you, the world would have been better. Blackie's soul left his mind, and he lost control of his body, and he fell to the ground. But the whole process seemed long, and it only took a breath's time. Blackie's belly armor was still sliding on the snow, and Dany brought his soul back to his body. At this moment, the King of Strange Ghost's soul also started a second life in a new body. 7 gods, isn't the King of Strange Ghosts dead? Why did these ghouls come back to life? Amidst the screams of old Barker and his men, the deviant ghosts and ghouls on the snowy ground were like charged terminators. Their pale blue eyes lit up once again, and they got up mechanically, running on the snowy ground as fast as flying. They were retreating. Danny landed on Blackie's back and shouted, "The king of strange ghosts isn't dead. Continue fighting." "Who are we fighting? Where is foreign ghost king?" Arya held her dagger, her expression blank. "Deviant ghosts and corpse ghosts are all running for their lives. Kill them all," Danny said casually. Without waiting for the others to respond, she mounted Big Black and washed the ground with her dragon flames. This time they were really unscrupulous in their cleansing. There was no king of strange ghosts, no god of frost, and no forbidden fire domain. The dark sky was dispelled, and the sky was light years, gloomy gray. The visibility was better than ever. Danny was still in the double overclocking state. Dahe was almost flying close to the ground, and the dragon flame it spat out was like 100-meter-wide broom, sweeping out scorched tracks on the white and flawless snowy plains. The corpses were burning and black smoke was billowing, and the burnt smell permeated the vast snowy plains. This is too much. If it was like this before. Compared to the Megalosaurus, our group seems to be useless. Jamie was deeply affected, and his face was full of dejection. She didn't dare to do this before. John said seriously, "Now that the sun is up, the Megalosaurus and Dragon Queen can see the danger from the ground. That's why they are so bold. If the foreign ghost king was still here, with more than 10 deviant ghosts and the forbidden fire domain, they would definitely be able to heavily injure the Megalosaurus. So the city wall and the guards are not useless. The Megalosaurus cooperated with the human soldiers and worked together to cover each other. This is the way to win." Although I've never been to the Great Wall in my life, I've always heard that the Great Wall is like a mountain range that will exist until the end of time. It sounds incredible, but it's a fact. The Eastwatch Night Watchmen saw it with their own eyes. Barristan pouted in the direction of Winterfell. "Before today, could you have thought of this?" Looking at the towering iceberg, all the doubtful creatures fell silent. Bran continued, "The barbarians guessed correctly. For thousands of years, the winter horn has been in Joman's tomb, but how did it appear? Humans don't remember, but the deviant ghosts remember, and they dug it out. 5 years ago, John found the winter horn under a rock at the Ancestor Fist Peak. It wasn't an accident. At that time, the deviant ghosts had just dug out the horn and transformed Bunyan. At that time, Bunyan's will hadn't completely fallen asleep. He didn't want to destroy humans, so he stole the horn and prepared to leave it to the Night Watchman." "How is that possible?" John couldn't believe it and shook his head. The others were also in disbelief. Bran sighed and said slowly, "Others may not understand the significance of the Ancestor Fist Peak. But John, you were the commander-in-chief of the Night Watchmen. Don't you know? The Ancestor Fist Peak was a hill that rose abruptly in the Ghost Shadow Forest. The terrain was steep and the view was good. There was a small river flowing at the foot of the hill. It was a rare strategic location beyond the Great Wall. If Dany was the king of the Seven Kingdoms and knew about the existence of the Ancestor Fist Peak, she would definitely build an outpost fortress at the top of the hill to warn the barbarians and deviant ghosts. In fact, before the first long night, the ancestors had built a simple circular fortress at the top of the hill, a circle of gray stone walls that reached the height of one's chest. Therefore, until now, the Ancestor Fist Peak was an important stronghold for the Night Watchmen north of the Great Wall. When Old Mormont led the Night Watchmen out of the Great Wall to inquire about the movements of the barbarians and deviant ghosts, he used the Ancestor Fist Peak as a base to stop the invading barbarians and deviant ghosts. Then the deviant ghosts taught the Night Watchmen who had forgotten their ancestors and history how to behave. Bunyan had been a ranger for more than 10 years and had stayed at the Ancestor Fist Peak countless times. He hid the Horn of Winter there in the hope that other rangers could find it and bring it to the south of the Great Wall. In order to remind the Night Watchmen, he also put a bag of dragon crystals beside the Horn of Winter. Unfortunately, no one understood what he meant. Bran said helplessly. John carefully recalled the scene when he found the horn and slowly accepted Bran's explanation. Why didn't Uncle Bunyan leave a letter to make things clear? He asked in a hoarse voice. He wasn't a scholar. How could he carry a pen and paper with him? Besides, he had already been transformed into the king of deviant ghosts at that time. Going against the king of deviant ghosts' instinct to destroy the living, he stole the horn of winter and buried it under the ancestor fist peak. That was the limit of what he could do. Why didn't the king of deviant ghosts find the horn after that? Barristan frowned. John smiled bitterly. Now that I think about it, they really did find it. Not long after Commander Mormont led us to the ancestor fist peak, the ghoul army surrounded us. After that, they chased the night watchman all the way to Castle Castle. Bran continued, I know what happened in the past, but I can't predict the state of the king of deviant ghosts. Combined with everything that happened today and seeing the king of deviant ghosts' second life with my own eyes, I came to this conclusion. The hound glanced at the big crow and said impatiently, I don't care about Bunyan Stark's will. Tell me clearly, can the king of deviant ghosts be killed, and how should we kill it? Actually, we almost killed it before. The crow's red eyes turned to Arya with a complicated look. If we wait a moment and let Dany Rise deal with the king of deviant ghosts, it's very likely that she'll directly destroy its soul. She has a special witchcraft that specifically targets creatures with immortal souls. Immortal soul, it sounds scary. Did the last king of deviant ghosts also have an immortal soul? Jaime frowned. How did Yasuo and Yahai end the long night? Yes, the red sword can also kill the king of deviant ghosts. Maybe we need to create a second, third, or even more red swords. Bran looked at the dragon queen who was sweeping the corpses in the distance and said thoughtfully, when Dany Rise comes back, we'll discuss this. Jaime heard this and his expression became very strange. I heard the red-robed woman say that forging a red sword requires the sacrifice of one's only loved one. So Yasuo and Yahai stabbed the newly forged red sword into their wife's heart. Is the dragon queen going to sacrifice her royal husband? She doesn't have a royal husband now. If she creates a red sword and sacrifices a royal husband, then... He looked around and the corner of his mouth twitched. I wonder if anyone is willing to be a volunteer. The little crab shuddered and shrunk its neck. It decided to get married when it returned to Crab Island. Whoever wants to be the queen's royal husband can be it. Chapter 8:27. Dany rode on Blackie and swept through the vast snowfield. She burned from noon until evening, when the sky was completely dark. This time the sky was dark because it was night time. Within a 20-kilometer radius of Winterfell, there were crisscrossing burn marks on the white carpet-like snow. She even chased them to the northwest wolf forest. At least 100,000 ghouls were burned to ashes by the dragon flames. When the sky was completely dark, she left the wolf forest and returned to the White Blade River mountain range, 10 kilometers southeast of Winterfell. The White Blade River meandered past the entrance of Winterfell. On both sides of the river were hundreds of kilometers of mountain ranges with many silver mines. Before opening the dimension portal and leaping into the dark whirlpool, Little Green and Little White hid in the neighboring mountain range. Obviously, Winterfell was the center of the forbidden spell attack. Dany couldn't let them hide in Winterfell. In fact, Dany's winged dragon legion was also in the mountain range. She chose an 800-meter-tall mountain peak and built a simple air base on a wind-sheltered platform. More than 50 tons of wildfire bombs were hidden there. The main reason was that Winterfell was too small. With a side length of 300 to 500 meters, 20,000 people were squeezed inside. How could the winged dragons, which were 20 to 30 meters long, stop? With millions of ghouls attacking the city, Dany had killed countless enemies in one day and one night, and she had also obtained an immeasurable amount of spiritual essence. She had only used 1/20th of the amount, and it had allowed Little White and Little Green to recover from their exhaustion. After using about 10% of the spiritual essence, Dany and the 58 crows became energetic again. They were left with 85% of the spiritual essence. Old Crab and the Winged Dragon Knights continued to stay at the air base. Dany brought the 3 megalosaurus back to Winterfell. Winterfell was located in a conical icicle with a diameter of 2 kilometers and a height of 2 kilometers. The ice outside was crystal clear. Inside, the war-torn castle, frightened people, and snow-covered trees were lifelike, forming a strange and beautiful scene. When Danny landed, about 3,000 soldiers were gathered in the ruins of Winterfell in front of the king's gate. Only the wooden houses, pillars, and roofs of Winterfell were demolished. The main structure was still there. Moreover, the people of the northern region were used to building basements to avoid the winter. Even some multi-story stone buildings could be used as living quarters. After receiving Blackie's warning, the 3,000 soldiers left Winterfell via the city gates or ladders. At least 5,000 of them left Winterfell. Now there were only 3,000 left, and most of them were injured. Wounds from swords, bites from deviant ghosts, frostbites from cold air beside the bonfires. There were wounded soldiers crying out in pain. "Your Majesty, I've used up all my divine art slots, but there's still a large group of injured people. I don't have any medicine or bandages here. Do you think you should help treat them?" As soon as the Megalosaurus landed, the exhausted Hound came looking for them. "Gather the wounded soldiers together." "I'll treat them together," Danny said directly. Hound said blankly, "The wounded soldiers have been arranged together. You can treat them when you go over. Let them line up before me side by side. Sir Barristan, bring some people over to help," Danny said. Hound was still puzzled, but he still left with White Knight. Jon came over again and said, "Your Majesty, there are still many people trapped in the Winterfell graveyard. Why don't you use your dragon flames to burn a hole and rescue them?" Danny didn't refuse. "There's no need to evacuate Winterfell. We can hollow out the interior and use this iceberg to survive the long night." The iceberg didn't just contain Winterfell. It also eroded half of Winterfell town. It was about 800 meters from the foot of the iceberg to the Winterfell gate. The iceberg in Winterfell was as small as the filling in the meat buns on the streets. Even if Winterfell was hollowed out, it wouldn't affect the overall structure of the iceberg. Removing the filling wouldn't affect the weight of the bun either. Whitey spat out dragon flames at the clear ice body. Danny stood at the side and controlled the area of the dragon flames with her fire control spell. The red flames collided with the blue ice, and the 2-meter-tall and 2-meter-wide semicircular arch slowly pushed inwards. The iceberg melted, and warm water flowed into the snow pit at the side. Hot steam lingered. At this time Old Bart, Hound, and a group of healthy warriors carried the wounded soldiers over. Danny frowned and looked at the dirty soldiers for a while. She said loudly, "Find some pots and pans and get some water from me to clean the wounds." After a while, when the wounded were shivering under the half-cold water, Danny let them huddle together again, shoulder to shoulder. "Most of you aren't believers of the 7 gods. In order to increase the effectiveness of the sacred healing spell, you are all praying to the Holy Mother in your hearts. At the same time, you are singing the Holy Mother's song with Hound. With me." Hound pointed at his nose and asked, "You are the chief bishop. You lead the singing. I will cast the divine spell." "All right." Hound stood in front of the wounded soldier. Under hundreds of curious and expectant gazes, he cleared his throat and said, "Gentle Holy Mother, the source of mercy, please bless your son to travel through the fierce battle, stop the arrows, block the swords and sabers, and let them see a bright tomorrow. Gentle Holy Mother, the hope of women, help your daughter not to suffer. Calm the anger, tame the madness, teach us to be tolerant of each other." After singing for a while in an off-key, rough voice, Hound suddenly froze. He looked at the crowd opposite him and asked, "Why don't you sing with me?" "Slow down, they can't keep up," Danny said impatiently. Then Hound slowly sang, "Gentle Holy Mother, the source of mercies. Gentle Holy Mother, the source of mercy." The group of northerners loudly sang the same off-key song. Although their singing was not very good, they had the pious and holy attitude that Danny needed. In short, these northerners had become shallow believers of the 7 gods without even knowing it or being willing to admit it. Faith came from hope. Now that they were suffering from illness, they must be hoping that the Holy Mother could help them get out of their current predicament. This was the foundation of faith. With faith, the efficiency of the holy healing art increased by more than 10 times. Danny did not care about the northerners' faith. She only wanted to save some divine power and spiritual quality. As the Holy Mother's song continued, a faint milky white halo rose from their wounds. The halo connected into a milky white glow. Holy, holy, grand and warm. Holy Mother, I can feel it. Holy Mother is watching me gently and caressing my wounds. I am full of strength. A bearded northerner closed his eyes and shouted randomly. The wound on his cheek that was bitten by a zombie was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Holy Mother is merciful. The hole in my stomach is healing. My intestines are moving. It's a miracle. My leg is healed. Isn't this a little too exaggerated? Jamie was dumbfounded. The hound was sweating profusely after casting a palm-sized holy healing art. The queen healed 600 to 700 people at once and her face didn't even turn pale. Is there such a huge difference between the chief bishop and a normal monk? His Majesty is blessed by the Holy Mother. He is the child of the 7 saints. He is different from the others, old Barton said with a devout expression. Wounded soldiers were often one of the biggest reasons for the decline of the army's morale. By the same logic, wounded soldiers were treated effectively with the miraculous, group healing art. Even if Winterfell was frozen, even if the King of Strange Ghosts escaped, even if the humans suffered heavy casualties in this battle, the remaining soldiers quickly regained their fighting spirit and became energetic. The atmosphere in the winter avoidance town camp became much more relaxed and cheerful. What's the matter with the King of Strange Ghosts? After the wounded left, Dany continued to burn the ice cave while asking the big crow beside her. Bran repeated what he said to Jamie, old Barton, and the others before concluding, I am 100% sure that after changing bodies, the King of Strange Ghosts will be much weaker than before. Stark's bloodline is not ordinary. You should have noticed this. Dany's eyes turned and asked, is it possible for the King of Strange Ghosts to take over Jon's body? For example, killing Jon, or kidnapping him and forcefully occupying his soul? Absolutely not. Bran said with certainty, not to mention that there can only be one King of Strange Ghosts in each long night. After this rebirth, the King of Strange Ghosts can no longer activate a second life in another strange ghost's body. In the millions of years of the Three-Eyed Crow's history, all the Transfiguration beings and Green Prophet who activated a second life will lose the ability to occupy other creatures' bodies. In other words, the gift of rebirth through possession is a one-time use. After using it, the Transfiguration ability will be lost. You mean if the King of Strange Ghosts is killed again, it will definitely die? Dany asked suspiciously. Hesitation flashed in the big crow's eyes. I'm not sure. Do you know how the King of Strange Ghosts was born? You know. Dany asked. The big crow shook its head and said, I have a guess, but I don't know the specific process. The strange ghosts leave simple ice runes in the dead's mind, transforming the corpse into a corpse ghost and controlling it. The King of Strange Ghosts leaves its will and meditation technique in the mind of a baby, allowing the baby to absorb the power of ice and become a strange ghost to control it. Then is it possible that the strange ghost summon the frost god through sacrifice and let the frost god leave its will in Bunyan's mind? It's very possible, Dany said. Then can the frost god take back the assimilated soul and return it to its main body, or transfer that soul to the next strange ghost? Bran said. Then the King of Strange Ghosts can never be killed? Dany said. What I mean is, killing the King of Strange Ghosts who activated a second life with a normal weapon might not be able to end the long night. What we really need to do is to destroy the will of the frost god in Bunyan's soul. Dany thought. You're right. Chapter 828. How many fragments of the seal of the Green Prophet did you get from King Strange Ghost? Bran asked. That's mine, Dany coldly said. Although King Strange Ghost was saved by Frost God, a small part of his soul had already been burned by Dragon Queen before he escaped. The seal of the Green Prophet belongs to the Three-Eyed Crow. I feel uneasy losing it in my hands. We've worked together a few times now and can be considered a reliable ally. Can't you help me? He couldn't take her by force, and he couldn't offer anything that could move Dragon Queen. So Bran had no choice but to play the sentimental card. But the problem was, did Dragon Queen have feelings for him? It's too late. I've already turned the seal of the Green Prophet into pure sentience, Dany said. Sentience is fine too. Strengthening my soul is the same as completing the seal of the Green Prophet. After I die, I'll also become a part of the Green Prophet, Bran hurriedly said. I've already fused the sentience into my soul, Dany said. I can feel it, you haven't, Gah. Bran stopped halfway, because Dragon Queen had swallowed the sentience of the Green Prophet right in front of him. You can feel what? I haven't? Dany asked solemnly. Bran didn't say anything. Dany sighed. With another 2% increase in my control over the heavenly path, the connection between the 7 gods and their followers is becoming clearer and clearer. So many voices, so many prayers, I can't handle it all. The 800 meters of ice was about to burn through, and the ice cave met the pile of rocks that was used to suppress King Strange Ghost. Save me. Dany was shocked. The voice came from the pile of rocks. There was still someone alive inside. Who's outside? Save me. Although the voice was as soft as a mosquito's, it was filled with great pain. Even the most cold-hearted person couldn't help but feel pity. Sir Richard, you're not dead yet? Dany was stunned for a moment when she sensed the mental wave from the stone. The stone pile in front of the city gate was different from the tomb cellar. The tomb was built from a natural underground cavern. There were gaps in the interior that led to further underground caverns, so air circulation was not a problem at all. Therefore, the ghoul army had already retreated, and Dany didn't immediately set fire to the glacier. But the rocks were completely covered by the ice, and there was limited oxygen. After such a long time, the oxygen must have been depleted. No, Richard was no longer a normal person. At this moment, Dany remembers that Richard is not a perfect resurrection like Big Sparrow. The Een spirit in his body is not completely removed. Not long after, a group of soldiers came in and moved away the stone slabs, bricks, wood and other debris, revealing a small space between 2 stone slabs. There were 2 corpses inside. They were naturally corpses. However, one of the corpses slowly opened its eyes and gently breathed in the cold air. Ah, the corpse is coming back to life. Quick, kill it. It's a corpse ghost. The barbarian soldiers carrying the corpse howled and went to look for the dragon-toothed dagger. I told you, he's Sir Richard. He's not dead, Dany said with a dark face. But he's ice, colder than ice, the soldier shouted. Look at his eyes. They're glowing blue, Dany reminded him. Everyone took a closer look and let out a long sigh of relief. Sir Richard's blue eyes were like extinguished candles. They were almost completely dim, let alone shining. When they carried Richard out of the ice and placed him by the fire to heat up, everyone gathered around to look at him curiously. Why isn't he dead? Jon asked in surprise. Well, the last time he was resurrected, he accidentally brought down a holy garment from heaven. Lying came naturally to her. Oh, I remember now, Jon said thoughtfully. At that time, Sir Richard was chanting something like, Mighty Heavenly Dragon. His body expanded and he was as strong as a bull. He stabbed the sword into the corpse. Speaking of this, Jon's face turned pale. His eyebrows twitched and he said, The King of Strange Ghosts is too strong. After being treated like that, a normal person would have died long ago. But it's fine. Something's wrong. Arya popped out from the crack of a rock. No one noticed where she was before. The King of Strange Ghosts can be injured too. Its chest, I socket, but... Arya was also embarrassed for a moment. The wounds haven't healed completely. It's limping. There's still a hole in its chest under the ice armor. I pierced its heart through that gap. Dany squatted by the fire and checked Richard's pulse and internal organs. She said, The King of Strange Ghosts is also a living creature. Of course it can be injured. However, it can absorb the power of ice from the long night to heal minor injuries. It's similar to the healing skills of the 7 gods. It's easy to heal external wounds, but it's very time-consuming to regenerate broken limbs. How is he? Arya leaned over and asked. It's very strange. The surface of his body is covered with a layer of frost, but the liquid inside his body is not frozen. Instead, it's in a state of hibernation, Dany said excitedly. In her previous life, scientists had worked hard for more than half a century, but they still couldn't find the technology to freeze living people. Now, with the productivity and the level of science in the Middle Ages, Richard had perfectly achieved the goal of scientists. The Een soul in the cell seems to be able to absorb energy from the extreme cold. This energy makes breathing an unnecessary physiological activity. Maybe Richard can survive in a hot and dry environment. We can try it if we have the chance. If we can prove that he can survive in extreme environments, he doesn't need to be a knight. It's a waste of his talent. He can become an interstellar explorer. Your Majesty, what are you talking about? Old Bar and the others were confused. The Dragon Queen's nonsensical ramblings stunned everyone. Songu, is Songu still alive? Beside the fire, Richard's body temperature rose as he slowly regained his vitality. He turned his head and asked with a dry voice. He went to heaven, Danny comforted him. Why didn't the King of Foreign Ghosts kill you? John asked curiously. It hates us too much. It wants us to suffer slowly in despair, Richard said through gritted teeth. Everyone was silent. You did such a thing to the King of Foreign Ghosts. You deserve to suffer slowly. But Sir Songu was just unlucky to be implicated. They started to burn from the city gate. Along the way, they met hundreds of people from the north who were frozen in ice. They melted the ice and carried the bodies out. Because of this, they wasted a lot of time. It was only at midnight that Danny arrived at the entrance of the tomb. Oh no, it was so crowded that the door of the tomb couldn't be closed in time. The cold air rushed in. Seeing the anxious and terrified ice sculptures in the staircase of the tomb, John's heart sank. Ah, this is Jenny Poole. She was always by Sansa's side. The tomb was very deep, about 30 meters underground. The narrow staircase spread down in a zigzag pattern. At the bottom of the staircase, John saw an ice sculpture that made his soul freeze. His eyes reddened and he almost cried. I told you Sansa is fine. The big crow on his shoulder said calmly. Not only is she fine, you can also see an unexpected old friend. Bran's voice sounded strange in the narrow passage. After clearing another layer of ice, the worry on John's face turned into surprise. The thick oak board at the entrance to the upper level was not covered, but the entrance to the tomb at the bottom level was tightly shut. He looked back at Jenny Poole's body carefully. Her face was filled with despair. She was curled up into a ball, her right hand clenched into a fist, as if she was hitting something. Jenny was blocked outside. She struggled for a long time before she froze to death. John shuddered. The iron oak door that was thicker than Danny's waist was slowly opened by the people in the tomb. There was a gap, and a few soldiers were holding torches to clear the ice shards between the door, so that the door could move freely. When the door was fully opened, a woman in red stood under the light of the fire. Her mysterious red eyes looked at the Dragon Queen who was holding the fireball. She said calmly, "What took you so long? You're not dead?" Danny was still calm, but John shouted first. Melisandre wore another ruby around her neck. It shone brightly in the dim tomb. When I stepped into the great King of Light's divine kingdom, he told me that some people had failed to fulfill their promises. The red-robed woman looked at Danny deeply. The long night did not end, and the mission was not completed. I could only take a step back, leave the heaven of light and fire, and return to the world of mortals. Welcome, welcome. It's good that you're back. The world still needs a great wizard like you. Danny's eyes were gloomy, but there was a bright smile on her face. Where's Sansa? Is she okay? John was only shocked by the red-robed woman's resurrection for a while, and then he looked into the tomb. She's fine. A bald middle-aged man with a square chin walked out of the shadows. His light blue eyes seemed to be shrouded in black smoke. They were not as pure as before, but had a depth that did not belong to Stannis. Erlu was also resurrected. His face was as pale as a dead man. His exposed skin did not have the luster and smoothness of a living person. It looked like pork belly that had been soaked in water for 2 hours. Judging from his appearance, it did not look like a perfect resurrection. However, Danny felt a similar aura from him when he was first resurrected. His body seemed to have been filled up and nourished by a powerful force. To put it simply, Lalo had invested more in him than the Lightning King and Madame Stoneheart, but less than John. Obviously, Lalo did not leave the long night behind. He intended to continue creating trouble through his agent. The tomb was warmer than expected. After burning the bones of Stark's ancestors, John purposefully transformed the tomb into an underground fortress. The hot spring in the forest of God's trees flowed from underground into the tomb. At the center of the underground hall, there was a pool made of bricks. The hot spring water flowed into the pool and made an arc in the tomb. When the heat dissipated and the water temperature dropped, it flowed into the cracks at the edge of the stone wall. Perhaps it would eventually flow into the underground river. The White Blade River was just beside Winterfell. At the entrance of the steamy hot spring, John found his sister. Although it was a little damp, it was the warmest like spring. I didn't expect the tomb to be so big. Perhaps it is connected to Gorney's Passage. The city builder Brandon chose a good place. At the end of the tomb, Dany felt the cold air pouring in through the gaps and holes. She sighed with emotion. You don't have to go to the surface anymore. Just spend the winter here. It's quite warm. A Northern Territory woman washing carrots by the hot spring water looked at the Dragon Queen in awe and whispered, "Everyone says that there is a mystic dragon hidden under Winterfell." Dany shook her head and said, "There is no mystic dragon, but there is a crack in the ground. Perhaps there was a volcano nearby tens of millions of years ago, but now it is long dead. There are fewer and fewer volcanoes in the world." Chapter 829. It took another day for the Dragon Queen to thaw out the main castle and the guest room from the ice. Even the training grounds, stables, warehouses, blacksmiths, kitchens, and other necessities around the castle were restored to normal. In the main castle, there was a living room with a burning fireplace. At that time, the red-robed woman had wrinkled skin and white hair. She looked like an old woman who was about to die. However, she didn't die. I saw her eyes. Yelien sank into her memories. Her red eyes were very beautiful. However, at that time, the red seemed to have faded away and turned into a dull light blue. "It seems like her eyes should have been blue," Arain said suspiciously. In other words, when the 3 Red Heart Knights carried the red-robed woman into the tomb, her eyes were still alive, Dany said with a frown. It wasn't just her eyes. Her hands were moving too. Viperopia corrected her. With Arain and the Viper status, they were the first to enter the tomb. The Red Heart Knights who carried the 2 corpses were also with them. In the face of danger, the greater nobles had the first chance to escape. Once they were safe, it was the lesser nobles' turn. After the lesser nobles were the knights, and after the knights were the servants of the greater nobles. Finally, it was the ordinary soldiers' turn. Sansa was stuck outside because as the Winterfell dungeon lord, she had to be calm and magnanimous. She almost lost both her life and her corpse. The red-robed woman took out a ruby leather necklace from her pocket and held it in her trembling hand. The ruby gave off a bright red light, and her hair and eyes were dyed red. Then she really returned to her original appearance. After that, she had the Crimson Heart Knights carry Stannis' body and soak it in the hot spring. When the ice melted and his body became soft, she took off all his clothes. As if she had thought of something that was not suitable for children, Princess Dorne's cheeks turned red, and her eyes became a little moist. She licked her plump and sexy lips and continued. Melisandre led the 3 knights to kneel by the pool and recite the Red God's sacrifice. The night is long and full of danger. Then the red-robed woman lowered her head and kissed Stannis's pale lips. He suddenly sat up, as if he had just woken up from a nightmare. His face was full of fear and confusion. The flames in the fireplace flickered, casting a distorted shadow on Yelene's olive-colored face. It was too scary. Nymeria was so scared that she screamed and was about to cry. The elegant lady with a long braid blushed and hit her cousin's back. She said angrily, "Didn't you shout at that time?" Elaine glanced at the curious Dragon Queen and awkwardly said, "It's not that I'm a coward. I also knew that Melisandre wanted to revive Stannis, but you know that Stannis has 2 wounds on his chest and back." She gestured at her left chest with her hand. Such a big hole right through his heart. I felt that his heart had already shattered into pieces of ice. I could see through it from the front to the back, but he survived. Jon couldn't help but touch his waist. It had also been pierced by countless swords. Dozens of night watchers held sharp swords and scolded him, oathbreaker and shame of the night watchers, while stabbing holes in his body. However, the ones attacking him were just ordinary people with ordinary weapons. Stannis's chest was pierced by the King of Ghouls' ice sword and his own light emissary. The coldest ice and the hottest fire. Ice and fire collided. It was burnt and frozen. It was very tragic. The wound on his chest didn't heal? Elaine asked in confusion. He had so many wounds on his body, but they disappeared immediately after he was revived. Not even a scar was left. That's the scary part. The wound is healing and the flesh is wriggling like maggots, but it can't fully grow. In the end, there are 2 slits in his heart. Elaine's face was pale and her voice was trembling. The snake elder sister Opia thought of her father and said, "It seems that the wound of the ice sword and the fire sword can't be healed. It's like a curse." Prince Oberyn was also a strange person. He was a scholar in his early years and left the City of Knowledge after creating the 6-section necklace. He traveled in the 9 free cities as a mercenary and formed his own mercenary group. He slept with men and women, and he was also slept with by men. He learned a lot about poisons and dark witchcraft. The poison that stabbed the Demon Mountain contained evil blood magic. Even the spellcaster scholar Cobbowern was helpless against it. Although Oberyn was promiscuous, he was very good to his illegitimate daughter and imparted all his knowledge to them. That night, in the main hall of the Winterfell castle, the fireplace was blazing, and the 4 walls were filled with torches. In the middle of the long wooden table sat the Earl and a group of knights, knight attendants and barbarian leaders. They were either sitting or standing. The summary meeting of the Battle of Winterfell was in progress. In this battle we lost 8,000 soldiers and more than 5,000 civilians. There are only slightly more than 6,000 soldiers, civilians and servants left. It's a heavy price. However, their sacrifice wasn't in vain. During the battle we placed more than 100 wooden ladders on the city walls. After nearly 10 hours of fierce fighting, each wooden ladder killed at least 1,000 enemies. More than 100,000 ghouls perished. Dragon Queen, who was at the city gate, took charge. From midnight to the next morning, at least 20,000 ghouls were killed by her. After the western city wall was lost, Sir Deacon Tarly detonated the wildfire bombs, and the Megalosaurus killed at least 20,000 ghouls. The ghouls that could climb the wooden ladders and attack the city walls were all armed ghouls. There were even thousands of knights. 100,000 ghouls were equivalent to millions of farmer ghouls. This was only the beginning. During the battle with the King of Deviant Ghosts, the Winged Dragon Legion's wildfire bombs annihilated the Deviant Ghost Knights. At least 200 Deviant Ghost Knights perished in the wildfire. The 200 Deviant Ghosts didn't travel alone. They controlled a large number of ghouls. If you go outside the Winterfell, you will see the snow-covered ground in the northeast direction. There are at least 300,000 ghouls. Yesterday afternoon, Dragon Queen rode the Megalosaurus and set the Deviant Ghosts ablaze. She killed more than 100,000 ghouls. In other words, in the Battle of Winterfell, we killed at least 600,000 ghouls and 400 Deviant Ghosts. I am sure that the main force of the ghouls has been destroyed. The King of the North, Jon Stark, was the first to stand up and announce the casualties and results. Clap, clap, clap. Lonely applause sounded in the quiet hall. Everyone looked at Ms. Long, who was at the main table, in confusion. Isn't such an achievement worthy of celebration? Dany was open and not embarrassed at all. You ran away from the King of Deviant Ghosts, Erlu said coldly. Dan and I frowned. At this moment, she could feel a repressed hostility from him. It was a hostility that shouldn't belong to him. In the process of his resurrection, his soul had lost a part of its precious characteristics. There's no other way. The first divine king suddenly became weak. The red sword lost its magic, and the frost god in the sky no longer forced it to use forbidden spells, she said. Why are you unwilling to sacrifice yourself? You know what I'm saying. I used my life to create such a good opportunity for you. Erlu questioned in a low voice. I need to consider the big picture. I can't sacrifice myself so easily. Dany's expression was serious. Erlu's pale and thin face began to twist. I misjudged you, he said coldly. Ah, I understand. Danny suddenly understood. You don't grind your teeth now. Lalo took away your habit of grinding your teeth. So grinding your teeth is your most precious characteristic. Danny's expression became very strange. Erlu really stopped grinding his teeth. He just looked at her with a cold and emotionless gaze without saying a word. In fact, Erlu's grinding of teeth was just an external manifestation of his intense emotions. Just like when Danny was too agitated, her eyebrows would change into strange shapes. Erlu didn't grind his teeth now, not because he couldn't, but because the fire in his heart was extinguished. He rarely had intense emotions. Ahem, Your Majesty, everyone is waiting for you to speak. John coughed a few times to remind the two bosses that their performance was being watched by others. Danny turned her head and saw a sea of eyes flashing with various emotions. Yes, the radiant messenger is broken. God King Lalo was severely injured by the frost god, and is on the verge of death. The number 1 war god and number 1 archmage are also dead. But we didn't lose. Danny's voice became passionate. The Battle of Winterfell broke the deviant ghost's delusion of destroying the Westeros in 3 months. Did the deviant ghosts say that they would destroy the Westeros in 3 months? Princess Arianne was puzzled. The deviant ghost king told me. Or do you think the deviant ghosts can't do it? Danny glanced at her. Half a month to fight from the Great Wall to Winterfell. If we failed. South of Winterfell is the Neck. 3 months to reach Dorne is not delusion. It's very realistic, Jaime said seriously. Danny ignored them and continued speaking loudly. This is the first defeat in the War of the Million Ghouls. To the deviant ghosts, it's not only a loss in numbers but also a loss in spirit. The Battle of Winterfell increased the confidence of the 7 kingdoms. It changed the fate of the humans who couldn't defeat the Frost God without the help of the gods. The fact that Arya Stark killed the deviant ghost king proves that everyone can be the savior of the world. After the passionate speech, there were no cheers or chants of, "Long live the Queen" or "Victory in the War of Winterfell." Everyone in the hall looked at each other and was silent for a few breaths. Then they started complaining emotionally. To be honest, after the Battle of Winterfell, I don't have much confidence in winning. Yes, this time we used all our strength but we couldn't end the long night. Is there any hope in the future? To the deviant ghosts, is the loss of troops meaningful? Will the group of zombies and icebergs feel defeated? I'm feeling a little hopeless. Isn't that so? Who wouldn't feel hopeless after seeing the dark vortex? We're living in an iceberg. I heard that it's the frost god's forbidden spell. I feel that Miss Arya's killing of the deviant ghost king is more hopeless. After killing him, he can be reborn. I feel like going to heaven. The long night is too terrifying. Dragon Queen's passionate speech was meant to boost the morale of the nobles, but the more she spoke, the more hopeless the nobles became. This time Danny was really embarrassed. A large crow flew from the direwolf statue above the fireplace to the center of the long table. I'm Bran Stark, this generation's three-eyed crow. The three-eyed crow is the god's messenger who protects the Westeros. I know all the secrets related to the long night. Now I want to tell everyone that the Battle of Winterfell is an unprecedented victory. As expected, only a blasphemous person like you would commit the blasphemous crime of usurping the position of the 7 gods. The red-robed woman looked at Danny with obvious disdain and disgust in her eyes. Danny looked at the red-robed woman carefully for a long time, from top to bottom, from left to right, and through her eyes she looked into her soul finally. She was sure that the red-robed woman was a native fanatic who had not been baptized by modern thinking. Alright, this conclusion did not require her to look left, right, up or down. Aunt May was a native. Danny found it hard to understand because Melisandre was also an extraordinaire. And she was even a top-notch boss among extraordinaires, a demigod. You have such great power. And you are no different from a god in the eyes of mortals. Why are you so obsessed with faith? She asked curiously. Melisandre showed an intelligent and elegant smile, and asked in return one day, A nobleman who was born a slave will be promoted to a duke of a country. A duke is no different from a king in the eyes of ordinary people. So can he look down on you and betray you? Danny did not know how to answer that. All right, you have a point. I can't use my own beliefs to ask you. You can choose to believe in the Light King, but you can't ask me to sacrifice everything to him. Melisandre clasped her hands and hung them on her abdomen, her wide sleeves covering them. She walked gracefully to the window, looked at Erlu who was busy downstairs, and said calmly, "If you are willing to sacrifice yourself, countless people will be spared. You don't understand. This is the era of human civilization. Humans are the main characters, and our fate should not be controlled by the hands of gods. As the child of the era, I represent the future of humans. If I die, humans will truly lose hope." Dragon Queen's expression was pained, as if her responsibility far exceeded that of a savior, and she was under great pressure. Melisandre's mouth was wide open, and her heart-shaped face was blank. "You are so arrogant," she said after a while. "No, I am not arrogant. I thought you would understand me." Dragon Queen's expression was hurt because she was not understood. "Sorry, I really don't understand." The red-robed woman's mouth twitched. "Don't you and Stannis have the same mindset?" Danny suddenly put on a smiling face. "Stannis thinks that he is the savior and has the responsibility to save the world, so he can make Lonley sacrifice himself and let Aegon light his path forward. Compared to him, I can go one step further. As the strongest and most promising human to become a true god, I have every reason to think that I am the future of humans and the child of the world. So I can reject anyone and any god that wants me to sacrifice myself. On the contrary, they should sacrifice themselves for me. I am the mandate of heaven." This time, it was Melisandre's turn to be speechless. "I am leaving. What else do you want?" The red-robed woman planned to leave. Stannis tried to persuade Stannis. Persuade Stannis. If you have feelings for him, don't let him squander away the glory of the Battle of Winterfell. To be honest, you might not like to hear this, but Stannis dying in Winterfell is the best ending for him. You really shouldn't have revived him. Danny sighed. Melisandre's red eyes flashed. She turned her head and said firmly, "Under the guidance of the great Lalo, he and I are walking on the path of glory. You can think whatever you want, but don't do anything that is out of line. I swear to you, I really don't want to kill the two of you with my own hands. I have to admit, in the mud pit that is the Westeros, you and he are the least annoying." Danny smiled bitterly. Melisandre's face was full of anger. Her body trembled slightly. "You know, it is not difficult for me to kill the two of you." Danny sighed. "That is not certain," the red-robed woman said coldly. Danny shook her head. "I reminded you, and I am not letting down our previous friendship. As for what you choose, that is your business. Let's skip this topic and talk about one last thing." At this point, Danny's face became unnatural. During the Battle of Winterfell, the strange Ghost King had a fire-forbidden realm. You also created a fire-forbidden realm. Can you teach me that technique? Melisandre's eyes widened. She looked at her as if she was looking at a little mouse that stole cat food. "Is there something wrong with your memory? Did you forget the threat you made to me?" Danny's pretty face scrunched up. She said helplessly, "You should know how helpful the realm is to me. If the Light King decided to stand by and do nothing, the next person to fight against the Frost God can only be me. The reason why I made this request after revealing my relationship with you, Stannis and Lalo, is simple. I don't want to lie to you. You want to use sincerity to move me? Unfortunately, you failed." The red-robed woman sneered. Danny shook her head and said, "I just want to live with a clear conscience." Melisandre looked at her deeply and turned to leave. Danny shrugged and opened the window. She leaned on the windowsill and admired the beautiful crystal city. Winterfell was embedded in an ice mountain, and the sky was a large piece of clear ice crystal. When the firelight shone on it, the ice reflected rainbow-colored light, and the ice surface reflected red clouds. Just a few torches created a fairy tale-like scene. Winterfell can be considered a blessing in disguise. This ice mountain is not only a barrier to the strange ghosts, but it also turned a dilapidated gray stone castle into the most beautiful building in the Seven Kingdoms. If Longlegs Lomas was still alive, he might have listed Winterfell as the 10th wonder of the world. You should thank me. It's a pity that I don't know the technique of the fire elemental domain. As for the wind elemental domain, the wind elemental domain isn't urgent. I suggest you spend some time to understand it yourself through the wind of a world. The Green Prophet is not on the same path as you. The big crow stepped into the window and cawed. I have to leave Winterfell too. A week ago, there was an urgent report from Slaves Bay. A few dragonworms burned the manor and barn south of Meereen City. Perhaps I have to make a trip to the Smoke Sea. Tap tap tap. The sound of iron boots running on the stone walkway approached. Dany turned her head and saw a pockmarked knight trotting over in a hurry in the dim walkway. Your Majesty, we are leaving soon. Melisandre asked me to pass this to you. Without waiting for Dany to ask, Sir Richard handed her a ham sausage. It was as thick and long as 200 grams of ham sausage, wrapped in a layer of gray lambskin. Reaching out to take it, Dany immediately realized that it was a roll of lambskin. What is this? She shook it thoughtfully. It was quite heavy. Richard shook his head. Chapter 831. After the pterosaur flew over from the White Blade River Air Force Base, Erlu brought Aunt May and left Winterfell. Jon led a group of Northern Territory nobles to send the king off. Dany received Aunt May's gift and started reading it on the spot. You're right. Territory should be comprehended by oneself. After a while, Dany looked away from the thin parchment and thought hard for a moment. She sighed and said, I'm an unorthodox person and lack a complete system of teaching. I've reached this stage and formed my own school. I can't learn from other schools. Melisandre was very generous. Since she gave away the secret book, she didn't hide it. The process of a fire wizard becoming a demigod and the realm after becoming a demigod were all recorded in the parchment. It was different from what Dany thought. After becoming a demigod, one had to study the divinity that was compatible with the element of the meditation technique. However, they studied the polarity of their meditation technique. The so-called polarity was a characteristic that was born after studying a certain rule to the extreme. It was like chemistry in high school. In university, one would be interested in chemistry and choose the chemistry department to further study. However, the chemistry department was divided into inorganic chemistry, organic chemistry, polymer chemistry, chemical materials, and many other departments. If one chose the materials department of the chemistry department, one would choose a research project in the materials department during their third or fourth year or postgraduate studies. For example, fuel cells, lithium-ion batteries, and polymer membranes belong to the materials department. Transcendents were also scholars. Their research project was the laws of the universe. When one studied the laws to the extreme and sang the song of the laws, one would become a true god. In the process of comprehending the song of the laws, a true god would develop the polarity of the song of the laws according to his talent, characteristics, and hobbies. It was like a university student choosing a specialty based on his talent, hobbies, and social employment environment. Dany, Sheep Egg, and Lala were the future, present, and past controllers of the Song of Fire respectively. They all had their own fire polarity. Dany's fire polarity was the creation of fire. Lala's fire polarity was the most primitive fire instinct, the greed of fire-like invasion, the greed of fire. Sheep Egg's fire polarity was fire rage. Currently, the supernatural world recognized Grand Adept Valeglia's meditation technique as the most advanced fire meditation technique in the world. In fact, the red-robed priest's meditation technique was not weaker than the Grand Magus meditation technique. It was just that the polarity of the two was different. In the end, the meditation technique of the Grand Wizard and the fire meditation technique of the Red God Priest were both created by the true gods. They both used the Song of Fire of the true gods as the end point of evolution. After cultivating a true god's meditation technique to become a demigod, the cultivator would begin to study the polarity of the meditation technique, which was the polarity of a true god's song of law, with the polarity of a true divinity's laws. Simulating a true divinity's divine kingdom was a domain. To put it bluntly, The true God that sang the Song of Laws represented a law of the world. Wherever a true God was, it would naturally cause the elements of their laws to become active, just like their own kingdom. For example, the fire god's surroundings were filled with fire elements, and all the fire elements were under the fire god's control. The scope of the fire god's control was his divine kingdom. A demigod who cultivated the fire god's meditation technique and delved into the fire god's fire polarity could simulate a counterfeit divine kingdom, which was the fire domain that Danny desired. If the Song of Laws chanter was a towering tree, then the transcendents who cultivated the true god's meditation technique were the vines on the tree. I can't walk on Lalo's path. I've also walked on another path for Sheep Egg's Grand Wizard meditation technique. If I don't study their fire mastery, their divine kingdoms will naturally not be able to be simulated. Danny said helplessly. Actually, a person can't only master one type of mastery. Mastery is both talent and knowledge. Bran said. You're not wrong, but now isn't the time. If my Song of Fire is completed, then I'll study Lalo's and Sheep Egg's mastery and learn from their strengths to make up for my weaknesses. I'll definitely be able to improve further. But right now, I haven't even fully grasped my own talent. Where would I have the time and energy to learn from others' strengths? Then use your own fire mastery to develop the domain, Bran said in a low voice. Danny gripped the red-robed lady's parchment tightly and nodded with a heavy expression. Although it's difficult, this is the only choice. Caw 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 caw. Amidst the shocked cries of the guards, a black torrent poured into the ice castle through the ice cave, spreading out a black cloud under the dazzling ice crystal sky. It was a large flock of crows. After half a year you should have 1,000 fire elves and 1,000 wind elves, right? Bran asked. It'll be a little hard, but it should be possible. Bran's method of distinguishing the elemental attributes of the crows was ingenious. He separated a thought from the 4,000 crows, the thought of the child of the forest crows fusing with his own consciousness, and then burned it in the flames of the Dragon Queen. Because his own consciousness was in the thought, he could distinguish the sensitivity of the child of the forest crows to the fire and wind elements. In just half an hour, 2,000 large crows with blinking red and golden eyes appeared around Danny. Blackie spat out dragon flames, and under the control of Danny, the 2,000 crows were burned to ashes, leaving only the souls to enter the faith space. With a skillful flip of her hand, she pulled out a soul of a large crow and burned it until it screeched. In front of Bran, she repeatedly burned it for almost an hour. Boom! A pure golden-haired double ponytailed elf with clear eyes was born. Mother Goddess. The little elf flapped her dragonfly wings and looked timidly at the Dragon Queen as she called out. Danny gently touched her apple-sized red cheeks and smiled. Look at your golden hair, I'll call you Peepa. Thank you Mother Goddess, I'll be called Peepa. Peepa rubbed her chubby cheeks on Danny's palm happily. When Peepa entered the faith space of the 7 gods to participate in Misty's training, Bran said gloomily. Shuai-Che said he wanted to keep his original name. All fire elves are named after fruits, that's the rule. Let's go to the Great Wall and heal your spine, then I'll return to Slaver's Bay. With the red-robed lady's secret manual and the 2,000 large crows, the Dragon Queen was in a good mood. After hesitating for a moment, Bran said with difficulty, Do you understand Sansa's thoughts? The change of topic was too fast, and Danny was stunned for a moment before saying, What plans does she have now? Bran's mouth was filled with bitterness and helplessness. She's different from the other Stark. Her personality, her experience after leaving Winterfell, and the teachings of Cersei and Littlefinger have filled her heart with a desire for power. Danny glanced at the large crow on the windowsill and sneered in her heart. Different from the other Stark, I don't believe you don't know what your grandfather did. Stark had never been more indifferent to fame and fortune than the other nobles of the 7 kingdoms. In other words, without the protagonist's life providence in Halo, Stark was just a normal gamer. I'd had no desire for power because he was born as a second son and received the education of a second son. If I'd was replaced by Brandon, perhaps the one to sit on the Iron Throne would not be Robert but Stark. In the Deer, Fish, Eagle and Wolf Alliance, the alliance leader was Jon Arryn, the first godfather of the 7 kingdoms. Ide and Robert had the same status. The first to enter the King's Landing was Stark, but Ide looked at the Iron Throne in front of him and handed it to Robert without hesitation. Jaime was stunned. "Get to the point, I don't have time to waste," Dany said impatiently. "Sansa is interested in the Iron Throne," Bran sighed. "So, she once made Arya swear loyalty to her," Bran said softly. Dany suddenly understood. "You mean she thinks Arya killed King Forenghost so the Iron Throne should belong to her? Why didn't she tell me herself? If she was still the innocent Princess Stark, she would definitely say it. Now, she hasn't even told anyone about this idea, but I know what she's thinking." Bran was like a useless father worrying about his daughter. His voice was tired, powerless, and depressed. "Since she only has an idea and hasn't said it or acted on it, what are you worried about? She may be ambitious, but she knows her limits," Dany said in confusion. "I'm not worried about her. I'm worried about you. I'm worried about your opinion of her and her actions." The big crow's eyes were burning as he stared into Dany's eyes. "You're worrying too much. I treat everyone who wants to fight for the Iron Throne equally. I have no bias," Dany said with a faint smile. After thinking for a while, she said, "How about this? We digitize the oath of, the one who ends the long night shall be king, and determine who the king of the 7 kingdoms is based on the final score. King Forenghost did indeed die at Arya's hands, so the total score is 10. Sansa gets 5. Erlu risked his life and got 3. I also did my best and got 2. What do you think?" Dany asked with a smile. "It's meaningless. You're the only human who can summon the sun and end the long night," Bran said disapprovingly. "Summoning the sun and dealing with the frost god is the job of the child of the era. It's not part of the bet," Dany said. "If she could really summon the sun and turn over the frost god, how strong would she be? Wouldn't it be embarrassing for such an existence to fight with a bunch of mortals for the Iron Throne in the latrine pit? You really don't care about the glory left behind by the Targaryen ancestors? The Iron Throne isn't just an Iron Throne. It's the same as Winterfell, an ancestral property." Even though Bran knew that the Dragon Queen was indifferent to the Westeros and didn't have much desire for the throne of the 7 kingdoms, he still couldn't understand her thoughts. Jon broke the oath for the House of Stark, Tyrion schemed for Lannister, and Stannis unswervingly pursued the legitimacy of the Baratheon dynasty. This was the normal behavior that was in line with Bran's worldview and values. "You're right. The King's Landing and the surrounding royal lands were all developed by the Targaryens. They belong to the ancestral property of the Targaryens, just like the Northern Territory is the land of the Stark family." Dany lamented, "I don't care about the ancestral property, but I don't want to be a prodigal either. In the future, no matter who becomes the king of the 7 kingdoms, they will have to find a new capital. The King's Landing will be like Winterfell and Storm's End Castle, becoming a Targaryen family castle." "That's not what I meant," Bran mumbled. The two of them were talking by the stables in the corner of the training ground. Jon led a group of soldiers towards the city gate. Every 2 soldiers were carrying a corpse, and there were also wailing Northern region civilians and soldiers on the side. "I want to hold a mass funeral and cremation for the soldiers and civilians who died in Winterfell." Seeing the Dragon Queen's gaze, Jon explained. Dany nodded. "I'll get Blackie to light the fire for you and absorb a wave of soul essence." Just as she was thinking, she suddenly caught a glimpse of the unusually conspicuous blazing red heart cloak. The big crow's red eyes stared at Songji's corpse without moving or speaking. Jon looked around. The people carrying the corpse were all squeezed in the training ground behind the city gate. Their faces were red from the cold, and they looked impatient. "Carry the corpse out and pile it on the crematorium." When the Megalosaurus wung. Before Jon could finish his sentence, a golden light broke through the dark night and descended from the sky. Within the holy light, there were specks of fog. A golden armored general slowly descended from the light. Everyone widened their eyes. The golden armored general's face and attire were too familiar. They could not help but exclaim, "Sir Richard, it's Sir Richard. He has descended from heaven." Swoosh! The holy golden light descended from the sky onto Sir Sanjay's corpse. The moment the golden armor general touched the corpse, the golden light was injected into it. Under everyone's shocked but reasonable gazes, Sir Sanjay on the stretcher moved a few times and groaned as he slowly woke up. "Is this heaven? So beautiful." Sangha looked at the dazzling ice crystal dome and was mesmerized. He could not help but scream. Suddenly, a big hairy face leaned over. The face was too close and the face was too ugly. It woke him up from his fantasy of heaven. Tormund touched Songji's face that was gradually warming up. "You're really alive? How magical. Knight of Hearts, this is Winterfell. Didn't you go to heaven?" the savage asked curiously. "Winterfell?" Sangha looked around and asked curiously, "I'm not dead." Suddenly, his face was filled with fear. "I'm dead. I died a terrible death. I froze to death in the ice. I went to a terrifying world. It's not heaven. It's Lalo's hell. Why didn't I go to heaven?" "Your Majesty," Danny quickly interrupted his nonsense and said sternly, "After you died, you went to the stranger's kingdom of the dead. It's not Lalo's hell. As for why you didn't go to heaven, I haven't achieved my goal. How can I be happy?" "What do you mean?" Sir Songgu was confused. "The king of the deviant ghosts is not dead. Your mission is not complete." Then, the Dragon Queen explained the second half of the Battle of Winterfell to Songgu with a serious expression. She also let Songgu understand the current situation. Finally, she comforted him. "Although you didn't go to heaven, you received a silver sacred garment from the 7 gods, just like Sir Richard." Songgu felt better, but he still muttered, "The silver sacred garment sounds inferior to the gold sacred garment." Pope Danny said sternly, "The power of the sacred garment comes from the faith of the 7 gods. As long as you're devout enough, it's normal for the bronze sacred garment to defeat the gold sacred garment. Moreover, yours is silver. There were only 12 gold sacred garments. Of course, they could not be given out randomly. Besides, she was right." Other than the difference in color, Songji's silver sacred garment was not inferior to Richard's gold sacred garment. Tormund rubbed his hands and smiled obsequiously. "Your Majesty, can you give me a sacred garment? I've also fought deviant ghosts. During the Battle of Winterfell 2 days ago, I killed 146 ghouls. That's half a deviant ghost. I'll send you to heaven. Will you come?" Danny laughed. "If I can return from heaven, I'm willing to give you a sacred garment." Tormund patted his chest and said righteously, "You don't believe in the 7 gods. Without the divine power of the 7 gods, you can't activate the sacred garment." Danny shook her head. Tormund looked conflicted. It seemed that he did not see any benefits from believing in the old gods. "As for the 7 gods, Your Majesty, can you revive my brother? He's only 15 years old." A young savage in his early 20s came before the Dragon Queen and knelt down to beg. "Your Majesty, please have mercy on my 2 children. They're only 3 years old at most. They can't live without a father." A northern woman sobbed, "Your Majesty, my mother." In a short while, 30 to 40 northerners knelt in front of Danny and begged for the revival of their loved ones. They've gone to heaven, or the heaven of the 7 gods, or the heaven of the old gods. That's the best place for them. Isn't it good to let them enjoy the sun and wine in heaven? What can they do after revival? What's the point of living? What's the point of dying? Danny advised loudly. Besides the huge consumption of energy during the revival, the flaws of the revival were apparent in the pockmarked knights. She could still control a small number of revivals. If there were too many flawed revivals and they formed a humanoid race with yin and yang spirituality, the situation would be unsalvageable. After Danny consoled them and offered to be the priest of the cremation ceremony, the northerners who missed their loved ones were persuaded to return. At night, after the cremation ceremony ended, the Dragon Queen rode the Black Dragon and left Winterfell for the north. In the bedroom of Miss Stark in the Winterfell main castle. "Jenny, don't. Close the door, close the door." "I'm sorry, Jenny." Sansa gripped the quilt tightly like a person who was grabbing onto the last vine before falling off a cliff. Theon squatted by the bed and used a wet towel to wipe the sweat off Sansa's face and forehead. Has she always been like this? Arya stood at the end of the bed and frowned. She was fine before, but after she saw Jenny's body, she kept having nightmares. Theon sighed softly. What happened then? Jon asked. Sansa was terrified. When the white frost fell, I carried her and ran. She screamed and screamed as she closed the door. Then when we entered the tomb, the guards locked the door. Jenny was left behind. Theon's expression was gloomy. His face was filled with sorrow and self-blame. When we recovered from the shock, we found Jenny blocked outside the door. Her cries and cries seemed to come from another world. She always did things that she regretted. But what's the use of regretting? Bran said coldly. In this bedroom, other than the dead Robb and Rickon of the Valley, the rest of the Stark siblings were present. Yes, Theon was Id's adopted son. He could be considered their sworn brother. If Id was still alive, he would definitely be happy to see this warm family reunion in the room. Bran. Sansa suddenly opened her eyes. Her beautiful eyes were filled with fear as they locked onto the big crow on the railing at the end of the bed. You're finally willing to see me. I really don't want to see you, Bran said flatly. You hate me? Sansa waved away Theon's towel and struggled to sit up. She stared into the crow's eyes and asked in a hoarse voice, Why do you hate me? Theon looked back and forth between Sansa and the big crow. He wanted to say something but stopped. Arya's expression was blank. Jon quickly came out to smooth things over. He said gently, Sansa, you're overthinking. Bran didn't mean anything else. Jon, shut up. I want Bran to say it himself. Sansa suppressed her anger and said in a low voice. Bran was silent for a moment. He said helplessly, You're my sister. I love you just like I love Arya and Jon. But you've done, are doing, and are about to do too many stupid things. I have reason to dislike you. You're tuning in to the Lee May's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.